Friends, fans, and fine folk, grab your drinks and snacks and come down to the campfire for this short rest with me and my friend Cinderblock Sally. Boo, 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 boo. Hello, Cinder.
Ba ba
How
ba
you
ba
going?
ba 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 ba. Hello.
Ba 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 ba. I'm doing well. How you doing?
Oh, buddy, I'm doing very well. I just finished recording a D&D session, and it was a hectic one. So I have high
Nice.
energy. I'm ready.
Nice. Yeah, ready for it. You got that. You got that post game hype up. The adrenaline's pumping. Was it a high level thing?
Oh, it's no. We're level 5. We're little guys. We're just a
Level
bunch of
5's
little
a good
guys.
level though. Level 5's a
It's a
good
great
level.
level.
You see, you
It's a great
start to
level.
feel like actual heroes. You can do two actions, two attacks per turn.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Suddenly it starts to feel good. So welcome into this short rest, everybody. This is just a chill interview chat series where I chat with all sorts of cool people from the industry. I had the good fortune of reaching out. Well, actually, tell you how we got in touch. I followed Cinderblock because I'd seen Cinderblock coming up on my YouTube quite a lot with all of the YouTube shorts and whatnot.
Shorts. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm seeing his face, literally his face, over and over again. YouTube's telling me I should follow this guy, so I went and subbed. And then being as I am predominantly on Twitch myself, I was like, I wonder if he also streams. Went and found him on Twitch and was like, I'll follow him there too. And then you must have seen the notification that like I'd followed you on Twitch, and you reached out and said, hey, I saw you follow on Twitch, but I don't really use it. Check out my YouTube instead.
Yeah. I
And I was
miss
like,
Twitch
hey.
sometimes, but I'm a YouTube boy now.
I was like, hey, I do follow you on YouTube as well, but hey, we should do some collab stuff. And you were down, so here we are.
So the first that I have heard of you, dear Robert,
Yes.
is through Maddie P.
Oh, nice.
A long time ago, when I
wow.
just started doing YouTube stuff. I don't remember how me and Maddie started talking, but he very graciously reached out to me and was like, let's talk, and gave me some really good advice for like entering into the world of being a content creator, like professionally. And then I watched you guys play some one shots or something, and
Oh, nice.
and it was the kind of the impression that I got from it was that there was an element of famous people involved or larger streamers involved, but I didn't know who anybody was. So mostly I was just like watching you guys play. But I watched you play some D&D on Twitch for a little while back in the day with Maddie P.
Nice.
And then I started watching you every now and then.
Now
I never watch you ever again.
No, yeah. Well, that's how content creation goes. There's only enough hours there's only enough hours in the day. There's only enough hours in the day, and you can't possibly be keeping up to date with all of your colleagues and friends and favorite content creators stuff. Like I don't watch Critical Role anymore, but that's how I got into the game, and I loved it and watched everything.
Same. I haven't watched any of the new season.
Yeah, I kept up with the season 3 until like 20 episodes or something, and then I was like, I'm gonna have to call it. This is finally the time that I say no more Critical Role, because keeping up with 4 hours a week is unfortunately not doable while you're also making stuff.
That's the thickest chapstick I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's fun because I get comments on it every time. It's like a Pritt stick, and it's like a glue stick.
It looks like it looks like a glue stick.
Oh. And it never
could
runs
just switch
out.
it for
It's a permanent chapstick.
That's cool. Like an ever-stopping gobstopper.
Everlasting, because it's that large. It's just never. It's like pens. Pens never actually run out. You just lose them eventually.
Yeah.
And then somebody else finds them. I've never had to buy a pen in my life. I've got 100 pens, and they're all completely different brands and types because they just accumulate. And you're like, where are these coming from? I don't know. Eventually, I lose them, accumulate more. So if we are in a short rest, I like to start with setting up what that short rest is. Why are we in the need of a short rest? What mission were we on where we need to take a breather? Where are we?
Oh.
What circumstance?
Okay.
Are we in a volcano? Are we in space? Are we out in the
plains?
plains?
No. We're not in a volcano. We're not in space. I think we're in a sewer. And I think we probably just escaped one of those gelatinous cubes that cleans the sewers. Like they just sort of roam and clean. And we're in like a little service room, like a
Mm-hmm.
broom closet
Yeah.
that like folks that work in the town and like twist the pipes can go
Yeah,
in.
yeah, lots of happening for some
And we've
reason.
got to wait till the oozes are done their roots
Nice.
before we
Yes. I
can make
think
our
I think I
exit.
think the GM must just made us do like a skill challenge like race essentially because we were down one end of the corridor and the ooze was coming down the other end and about halfway down the corridor closer to the ooze was this room and we realized this is the only escape route, so we've got to run to that room before the ooze gets to it so that we can dive into the doorway, and we did that and we're all exhausted and we're having a short rest.
I fucking hate oozes. Do we curse on your show? I didn't even ask about that.
We can fucking curse all you like.
I know we can, but I'm trying to, you want to put on the appropriate amount of airs when you're
I
on
have
someone's
no
new
airs or
program.
graces. If anybody was watching me cussing out Baldur's Gate yesterday for all of the pain in the ass things that it was doing to me, and
What
me not
was it doing to
understanding.
you?
Just me not understanding how hiding works, and so I kept screwing it up or using an action to hide as a rogue instead of my bonus action. And I was like, well, obviously I wanted to do it as a bonus action so that then I can shoot. It's the whole point of being a rogue. And my stupid ass AI party, like I'd walk through a trap and be like, "Oh, I'm bleeding damage," and then the rest of them would go, "Oh, blah, 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 blah. Oh, I'm bleeding." Well, stop then.
The secret that I've learned is that as soon as you enter anything like a trap, you got to go into initiative mode.
Right? Yeah. Is there a
It's like a
shortcut for
button
that?
you hit.
Is there a
Yeah,
shortcut? I gotta work out what the shortcut button is.
it's the hourglass on the bottom.
Yeah, there's the big one on the screen, but that requires me getting my mouse into it. I wonder if there's just like a quick keyboard shortcut.
Well, I'm sure there is.
Anyway.
Somebody said hitting C on your rogue should activate the cunning action hide. Oh, that was Dragonus. Dragonus is one of my boys. What's up, Dragonus?
So that's where we're in the sewer. We're in a janitorial room within the sewer, waiting for the oozes to finish their circuits around so that we can continue our mission. I love that. What are we eating and drinking on this short rest, both in real life and in the game? I'm just drinking
real
water,
life,
and I've just had cereal, so I'm not having any food right now.
In real life, I have a warm drink and cold drink, water and tea. Not that exciting. In game, I don't know. Probably something weird. Maybe some. Okay, maybe some
we're going through our packs
expensive...
of things that haven't gotten ruined in the sewers for one thing.
Yeah.
Sewage waters.
So I think I think that maybe one of the only things that we have right now, and it's sort of like a little like a celebratory drink, is whomever we were making a break from. We did a mission, but we probably stole a couple things because we're skeezy. We're skeezy guys.
Sure. Skeezy guys.
And maybe like a very expensive bottle of some extra planar alcohol.
I love it.
Like some celestial mead, or maybe some elemental whiskey. And we're drinking it mostly because it's the only container that was like sealed, so it doesn't have like a thin layer of like ooze viscera on it. You know what I mean?
Ooze and crap. Yeah.
It's like you're opening your water bottle and you pour it out and it's like thick and there's like flecks of little oozes growing in it. It's like, all right, we're drinking this.
Love it. And then I unrolled my rations and I'm like, I'm gonna go hungry. Just drop them back in the sewage. So I like to start a short rest now that we're fully settled in and we know the circumstances. I like to get to know my party members somewhat. I like to start with names. Tell me about Cinderblock Sally. Where did the name come from when you first started making stuff?
A long time ago, I used to do theater with a company called the Baltimore Rock Opera Society, where we put on big scale sort of like psychedelic or heavy metal rock operas. We did one about H.H. Holmes, the first American serial killer. We did one that was like a dubstep one called Electric Pharaoh, which was taking place in like a sci-fi dystopian pharaoh future. But when I moved from Baltimore and I wanted to do theater again, I didn't have a cool company to do stuff with, so I decided to put on my own show. And I realized very quickly that in order to put on a show by yourself, you need a lot of gimmicks to make it fun, because if you don't have a lot of talent, you need to rest on the laurels of gimmicks. So one of the gimmicks that I had was I had a big whiteboard that I would like write or draw stuff on or like reveal pictures on. And towards the end of the show, I put the email address cinderblocksally@gmail.com up, and I encouraged people to email me if they wanted to chat. And I just made the email just up randomly because I thought it was funny. And then I was playing Overwatch one day, and somebody called me Cinder on it, and I was like, "Oh, that's actually cool." Like Cinderblock Sally shortened to Cinder. That's cool. So then I was like, you know what? This is going to be my name. I'm going to stick to it.
But where did it come from in the first place? Like, where did you?
I just thought Cinderblock Sally sounded really nice and funny and a little bit irreverent. Like I thought it was a funny joke that the email address was Cinderblock Sally, because that's I don't know, it just rolls off the tongue nicely.
it does. You just came to you like just off the top of your head, just like two.
Yeah, I just made it up. But then
initially
but then
it was two random words, Cinderblock and Sally, and then you were like, it'll be even funnier if I split the first one and add it to the second, so it's Block Sally.
Yeah, well, that happened when people started calling me Cinder, and I went from thinking it was funny to thinking like, oh, I actually like this. Like, I want to use this. Because the nickname Cinder is badass. And I'm very rarely a badass person. You know what I mean? So it's nice to have those moments.
What are you talking about? We play D&D.
We can get them.
D&D's super badass. Everybody.
I think
it's getting that way though.
To be badass.
I was listening to somebody the other day that was talking about nerd culture, and they were like, nerds used to be. It wasn't that long ago that nerds were like the outcast, and like nerds have this sort of feeling that we are outcast in society, but we live in a nerd society now, where like the top grossing film of all time is a comic book film, a superhero film, and like all this sort of shit. Like D&D has no longer got that stigma around playing it. Like
it does with some people, but it's very acceptable. It's very acceptable now.
It's an interesting place to be in where everybody's proud of being nerds, and like nerd conventions can have like tens of thousands of people go into them, and there's like 20 of them every year at least. 20 like big nerd conventions.
But okay, let me ask you this: do you identify as a nerd? Because I acknowledge that I like all the nerd stuff, but I never imagine myself as a nerd. I'm just some dude. I'm just a guy. You know, I'm not in anything.
You don't like labels, man. So you're a hippie.
I am a hippie too, but yeah, I don't know. I never really imagined myself as a nerd. I just imagined myself as a guy that really likes monsters. But I guess that's a nerd. So maybe I am a nerd. Gosh darn it!
What are the nerds? I also listened to a thing with what's his name, Simon Pegg, a long while ago, where somebody is like a Q&A at a convention or something, and some little girl asked him about like being bullied for being a nerd or something, and he said like everybody's a nerd because all it really means to be a nerd is you're very knowledgeable about a particular subject, and you get like really excited about a thing. And some people are nerdy about sports. Some people, like, we don't really think of them as nerds, but like jocks are also nerds because they're nerdy about whatever sport they're super in depth into. And like carpenters are nerdy about wood and all the rest of it. So I'm definitely a nerd because I'm a super maths geek and I'm a super D&D nerd. So I'm fine with that label, that title.
All right, I guess I'll wear it. I'll wear the mantle.
You don't have to. You don't have to wear a nerd.
I'm putting it on. It's on. Nerd. I put it on.
I can't take it off now, Rob.
I've buttoned the clasp. We're in it. We're in it. It's a cursed item. I can't willfully unattune to it.
Can't get it off now. So how did you become a nerd other than just right this second? How did you start getting involved in monsters and then Dungeons & Dragons? Which came first?
I've liked monsters. I've loved monsters is the first thing I remember liking. When I was little, all right, two stories. One, when I was very little, and I heard rumors from my friends about like monsters under beds or in closets, or I saw it on TV. But when that idea creeped into my head that there could be a monster in like the dark places of my bedroom, instead of getting afraid, I would steal food out of the fridge and I would put it in the closet on the floor because I wanted a monster to come live in my closet. And my parents got very upset with me about that because it was I would literally like take like some like turkey slices and just leave them on the floor of my closet because I wanted a monster in my closet.
That's amazing, and they love turkey.
Yeah, they do. Everybody knows that. And then and then when whenever there were situations where it was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Growing up in school, I always said I wanted to be a mad scientist because I wanted to make monsters. That was like the goal. And when I learned that you couldn't do that Like when I learned that it's not a real job to like, how do you mix a bat and a wolf? And I learned that like that's not a thing that you're gonna do.
It's not a thing in the world.
I got way less into science as soon as that became a thing.
What's that? Clipper, the gene splicing technology. Things like that are getting a lot closer than people think. People are already putting fish DNA into chimps and stuff like that. So CRISPR.
Yeah,
CRISPR,
but it's doing. You know what it is? It's the same level of cool as like the people that say that magic is real because if you envision something, you can make it more likely. Like, yeah, sure, that might be real. But in the same way that, like, I'm not going to believe in magic until I see a dragon land in my backyard. I'm not going to believe in that gene splicer stuff until I see
an island of Dr. Moreau thing.
Yeah, I want to see a chimp with tentacles. You know what I mean? Like, I need to see the... I don't want the... Like, oh, no, it's good. It's good. You're going to get better health. Okay, sure. That's fine. But I want the... You know, give us something. Give us something to like remember.
Fine, medicine is gonna improve, but where's my where's my crocodile-faced bird flying through the sky?
Exactly. I want a hummingbird with the face of a gulper eel. You know what a gulper eel is?
No.
A gulper eel is a... Look it up. They're crazy animals. But a gulper eel is a deep sea eel. They're very small, very slender, but their jaw and mouth unhinges and opens like a pelican's jaw. So they can they literally can swallow whole animals that are significantly larger than them. It is a very weird thing, but that is how it works. So I want a hummingbird that can eat a cat. I feel like that would be great. And then when it eats the cat, it like can only fly a little. You know, it's like a giant balloon,
and it's already got the hummingbird wings going crazy. So then it's...
I want one of those.
Just take it off.
Yeah.
Like when you see like a helicopter trying to lift like a huge block or something underneath it, and it's like really straining under the weight, and the thing starts to sway, and it's really struggling.
Yeah, but I've always loved monsters. When I was little, I don't know why, but this you know, I'm ancient. I'm thousands of years old. But when I was little, we inherited a lot of movies from someone in my family, and in the movie collection that we inherited were every single old Universal monster movie, like all the Frankenstein movies, all the Wolfman movies, all the Dracula movies, all the Creature of the Black Lagoon movies. And we didn't have cable growing up, so I grew up watching old black and white monster movies and the Marx Brothers and Sherlock Holmes movies. So like old Sherlock Holmes movies.
Yeah.
So I just was always engrossed in like the world of like if there's fog on the ground to the point where you can't see the ground, that's my comfort zone. That was where I was at from day one.
The movies where they way overuse the fog machine.
Yeah. That's what I want.
Mist is my favorite terrain.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I've always loved monsters, and I got into D&D through those folks that I did theater stuff with in Baltimore. I played 4 or 5 sessions of D&D with them, and then I moved. And when I moved was about the same time that 5th edition came out, and I was so unfamiliar with D&D that when I started to try to relearn D&D on my own, and I was learning 5th edition, I didn't know that I had switched editions from 4th edition to 5th edition. So it was just sort of like, this is the D&D that I learned. But when I moved to Philly, I basically decided I was going to start trying to play D&D. So I had a big party one day at my house, invited a bunch of folks over, and we basically drank and made character sheets together and sort of like went through building characters. There were like 15 people that showed up. Everybody made a character. And then at the end of it, I was like, so I want to run D&D. If you're interested in playing D&D, you have a character now. Let me know. And then it ended up being a group of like 7 or 8 people, which is way too big for a first campaign, but that's the nature of the game. And I've been dungeon mastering and doing D&D stuff ever since.
Nice. You immediately got hooked on it after that first game. And you
oh my god! I mean, it's the most satisfying. It's the most satisfying non-physical game in the world.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's
hard to compare. It's hard to compare to like sports and things because physical activity I think is quite different. But in terms of like I'm sitting in a room
in the body, like physically.
Yeah, and it's like
when you're exercising. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just different. It's just not worth comparing. But in terms of like games, like I'm sitting in a chair with other people or by myself doing a thing. I feel like D&D or any TTRPG that kind of feels that we're using imagination games. It's the best. I want to do it forever.
The times that I find it most useful to compare to sports with D&D is just when people don't understand why somebody would watch me playing D&D, which is usually my brothers. It's usually people in my family that don't understand what my job is, and like a couple of times my brothers have been like, so tell me again, like what they go through waves of been like, let's try and understand what Rob does for a living. And they'll be like, so what? So people just watch you playing D&D, like you just tune in to watch somebody playing a board game essentially. And I'd be like, yeah. And they'd be like, I don't understand why people would do that. And I'd be like, yeah, I suppose you're right. So how was the game yesterday? And they'd be like, oh, it was great. Man U went up 2-0. And I was like, yeah, okay. And they're just like oblivious to what I'm getting at. How was the Formula One yesterday? Were you driving? Were you on the... No? You were watching somebody who's really good at doing what they do what they do, because it's really entertaining to watch somebody do something they're really good at.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's a strange thing to explain it to people that don't really know what it is. I don't even try to anymore. I just tell people that I do stuff on YouTube. I don't even worry about diving deep into any of it.
Yeah, it's always a case of gauging where in the conversation they want to be cut off. So like, what do you do for a living? I'm like, I'm an entertainer. And if they just like, okay, cool, and they just no follow-up questions, I'm like, that's as much as they knew.
This is how the conversation goes with me almost every time. Somebody's like, what do you do for a living? I'm like, I hate answering that question, because I do hate answering that question. And then I say, I'm a YouTuber. And then they get really excited and they say, what do you mean? Like, what kind of YouTube do you do? And I'm like, I do mostly D&D stuff. And they go immediately from excitement to like bewilderment and like, oh, that's nice. Okay. It's like such a 180. Such a 180. They hear YouTuber and their eyes light up. You know?
They're expecting, are you Mr. Beast? So, what level of your daily life is taken up by your YouTube and content creation stuff these days?
Too much of it, a lot of it. I used to work full time in very real world people jobs for most of my life, and I only stopped doing those like about a year ago, maybe a little less than a year ago. So I'm still kind of new to doing this professionally. But I think my workload has like doubled.
Yeah.
Realistically, it's pretty much everything I do with my time other than spending time with my family. It's basically all I do.
Yeah,
but it is kind of fun most of the time. Like, there's very few parts of it where I'm like deeply frustrated. You know, I used to work a lot less, but I was deeply frustrated, or like just my soul was being sucked out through my eyes most of the time. And I'm not feeling either of those anymore, so I don't really
That is a genuine benefit when you get to that point where you're not feeling like you're losing your soul to your job. What did you did you used to do for real boy jobs?
For a long time I was a teacher. I used to do early childhood education, and I really liked doing that. I was a preschool teacher, and then I worked with like specialists that would run programs for kids. So like there would be like a potter or like some skilled arts person. And then I would work with them to help them build programming to suit the age of the kids they were going to be working with. Right. So if somebody was like an actor or a singer or whatever they did, and they were going to come run a program at a school, I would be like, you're working with 10-year-olds. This is what you can expect. This is what you should think about in terms of how you build your program. And then I worked for WeWork for a while, which is a crazy company that had a whole mess of craziness happen to it. But I basically was a community manager at a office building that companies could rent office space out of. And that's what I did for about a year and a half. And then I ran away.
Every bit as exciting as it sounds.
But there were about 2 weeks of it that were exciting. I will say the best part of that job was that I started running D&D at the office. And I basically ran it as like a community program where it's like, if you want to play D&D at 5 to 7, I'm going to be running it here. And the group of people that started playing D&D in that group, none of them knew each other beforehand. Only only one of them had played D&D before. And then that was my main D&D group over COVID. And we played religiously over COVID to the point that we like went to some of each other's weddings and stuff. So that was pretty cool. It was like a very cool thing to be like, I have used Dungeons and Dragons to create friendship and power. That was cool. But everything else of the job was pretty horrible. I got to really, really witness the vapidness and the lack of integrity in like salesman stuff and capitalism firsthand in a way that I really Did not like the way that I had to act, and did not like the people that were around me.
Money, 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 and everything's return on investment, and everything has to come down to does the line go up or does the line go down?
Yeah, and I like the people that I worked with, but all the people that rented space from there, it's just like, you know how sometimes you talk to a person and you feel like they're trying to take advantage of you because of the way they're talking to you?
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's like a very salesman-y, crypto bro kind of way of talking. That was just most of the people there. So it was very, very draining to be it was very draining to be around all of that for forever.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I ran away.
I found that was one of the things at Gen Con was like you could tell when you're talking to somebody who's not actually listening to you. They're listening to like they're looking for like who's the biggest person in the room that I can schmooze with and get to know, and and then you talk to the people who are genuinely just happy to talk to you, regardless of how big your audience is and how big your numbers are and stuff. You can always tell. And I think the fact that right now where I'm at in my career, I'm happy with where I'm at, and I'm not crazy looking for growth and pushing and things because I'm like working on personal life stuff, and so I'm like I'm happy to just stay here for now, and then I'll put more projects into where when I need it. And because of that, I wasn't really desperate for people to get to know me and like to really remember who I am and stuff, and so I ended up actually, in a sort of counterintuitive way, that's actually more helpful for getting to know people and making contact, because they see you as like, there's just this guy who's just hanging out making his own stuff and he's happy with what he's doing. He's not trying to push himself and wanting more.
I'm definitely not in that place. I'm like fiendishly trying to grow in a way that I acknowledge is unhealthy, and I care way too much about the numbers. But I'm a very, very big believer of the fact that in the industry of being a performer and an entertainer, you have to prove yourself. Like, I think that connections and like knowing people and people knowing you is incredibly important. But at the end of the day, if it can't just be me building it by myself, I feel like the quality isn't there yet. You know what I mean? I don't know how much that's a smart idea or not, but like when I was in school, I had a lot of friends that were trying to be professional musicians, and regularly they would do shows, and there'd be like 20 or 30 people would show up from our friend group or from school, and we're like, oh, this was a really big crowd, really cool crowd. And they would always be like, it's not really a crowd when the people that show up are like your friends. It's a crowd.
Yeah.
Like you have success when strangers are interested.
Yeah.
And I sort of feel the same way about content creation. Like the whole connection making thing, I think, is incredibly important to just like learn how these things work, because there is a lot of like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and some people know what they're doing, and it's good to just do that to learn. But at the end of the day, if the thing that I'm making isn't entertaining, regardless of who I know, then who I know doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yep,
100%. Yeah, you've got to find your own voice, your own flavor, I suppose. You've got to
find your own way.
And that's it, everybody. We found the
and we're out of here.
Found the end of the stream. we were setting each other up to push towards a lyric. That's it. That's as soon as we find the lyric, the stream's over. So at what point did you move into creating content instead of just playing D&D? So we know how you got into it, but how did you start going, other people will find this fun?
One of my players suggested I make a TikTok page, and use the TikTok page to talk about D&D monsters. And then I was like, I don't want to go on TikTok. And they were like, it's not just 14-year-olds dancing. It's like a really fun thing for like this. And they were showing me like people that basically did what they were like, I should do for like comic books. And I was like, oh, yeah, I could try doing that. So then I just started making TikToks about monsters, and very slowly over the course of a couple months, grew a medium decent following. And then that turned into me trying to stream on Twitch. And that turned into me making shorts on YouTube. And then my YouTube blew up, and that turned into me realizing I have a lot more followers on YouTube, so I should just stream on YouTube, because Twitch was not growing at all. But there are some parts of Twitch that I really miss, because Twitch is so community-based, and YouTube, you're alone in the universe.
Yeah, that's the big difference I've found. I cut my teeth on Twitch, essentially, and then grew my YouTube from that. But my YouTube has still always been secondary to my Twitch because of the fact that it just naturally grows a community here that isn't on YouTube. There's no raiding functions, and there's no like, there's less incentive for collaborations and things. And
You can raid. It is annoying to it's like you have to do back end work in your. I can actually we'll talk about it off screen, but I can
Yeah.
show you how if you care about that. Yeah, and like even just the thing where it's like I can see who's streaming that I know. Like I have like my little crew, or I can click a button and it's like I'm in the D&D thing. I can just see
Yeah.
all the D&D
D&D
streamers.
the categories, yeah, putting it into categories of like, look, these other people are also streaming this, which
Yeah,
was
but yeah,
amazing
it
for when I
started.
was starting out because I was like, okay, let's start raiding into some random D&D streams and seeing how they go in, and then you'd raid in and be like, no, I don't like this guy, or I don't like these guys are boring, or that was an incredibly racist thing to say. Let's not raid into this guy or whatever. And then eventually you find people who are like, oh, this guy's really entertaining, or like I've
Yeah,
raided in expecting that sorry guys, I need to go and deal with something, and so you raid away, and then you end up just sitting there anyway for half an hour just listening to this guy talk, and you go, fuck this guy. Okay, I guess I'm gonna follow this guy and raid into him some
yeah.
more. And some of those are now my best friends. And
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really, really good for that. YouTube is not that. YouTube, you're an island, but maybe one day you won't. Maybe one day we'll be more of an archipelago. Who's to say?
YouTube is well, every platform is failing to stay in their own lane and like find the thing that they can do better than anybody else, and instead just like turn into this homogenous platform of we do everything with the shorts and the reels and the whatever else. And so eventually everything will just take all of the best items from all of the other platforms and use that, I guess. So we can hope that they'll start looking at the success of what Twitch does well and start borrowing from that, I guess. So
Maybe.
at what point did you kind of like decide what it is you're gonna do? Did it just evolved over time, or you were just like homebrew's my thing, or like what's
When I started streaming on
was it
Twitch,
a conscious
okay,
decision?
yeah, it is. I'm gonna be very honest with you and your audience right now.
Please.
I'm gonna be revelatory, not in the way that it's divine, but it's
Zone of truth.
personally revelatory. I think that most D&D live plays, not all, but a lot of them are almost unwatchable.
Mm.
Whether it's because of audio issues, whether it's because of the formatting isn't working, whether it's because the people that are playing it aren't really thinking in performer mode, they're kind of thinking in D&D player
Mm-hmm,
mode.
mm-hmm.
Or you're just like watching episode 16 of some random show, you know what I mean? Like it's very hard to get into
Yeah.
that. So I was thinking, how can I do this without having to run a D&D game? Because A, that's a lot
Yeah.
of work. And then
Yeah.
B, it feels like I would have to do so much to make it of a quality that would be watchable, because I'm really new to all of this and I'm not really good at tech stuff. And I was like, I'm not going to do any of that. I love D&D homebrew. I love writing D&D homebrew. I'm going to make a show where I just go on Reddit and I really aggressively critique D&D homebrew. I think that'll be entertaining, and I think it'll be a little bit educational. And then I just started doing that. And then that evolved into what I do now, where basically every week I put out a form and people can submit their homebrew to that form. And then whenever I stream, I usually do a little bit of like an activity where I'm either writing or doing a call-in show or something. And then I review the homebrew that people submit in those forms. And I'm a very harsh critic, but
Mm.
I very intentionally go in with this goal of like, I'm not judging you. I'm judging your
Judging
work
the work.
where it
Yeah.
is right now. And the goal is growth. So you're here. I try to treat it like a writing workshop where it's like your
Yeah.
goal. If I'm critiquing your piece, your goal is not to defend your piece. Your
Yeah.
goal is to listen to the way that I react to your piece and to decide how much my reaction is valuable for
Mm-hmm.
you and how much you want to listen to or not listen to. But it started as that. Basically started with me realizing, we were talking about this before stream, I'm very aware of my limitations.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, maybe that I feel differently about it a little bit now, but I certainly knew when I started streaming that I did not have the capacity to put on a quality of D&D, a quality show of live play D&D that would be of enough quality that I would want to watch it.
Yes. Yeah.
And if it wouldn't be enough quality for me to want to watch it, why would some random jabroni want to watch it? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
You gotta love your own stuff, otherwise, nobody else is gonna.
Because actual plays are so hard to manage. Like, I feel like to do an actual play well, you basically need an extra person who is not on camera, who is like the director, that is
Oh,
like
100%.
constantly changing camera angles and zooming in and stuff. And I just I don't have that. I
Yeah,
don't
you
even know how to
definitely
set
need
that up.
text.
I'm just a
Yeah.
guy in a basement.
Yeah, you would. Yeah, that's basically the same thing. I've noticed that a lot actually with your videos. When I'm watching them, I'm going, we think a lot alike. Or I would have said the same thing about that or whatever. And even to this degree, I'm like, we had the same path getting into it, because I started going, maybe I should do an actual play, maybe I should set it up, and then I thought, well, it's going to be a lot of work, and I'm going to need to get somewhere like real good quality before I get to that point. So let's try and build an audience up to the point where I can do an actual play, and there'd be people who would actually care to watch it. So then maybe I'll start with, maybe I'll do some monster review and stuff, and maybe I'll like make some monsters. I can homebrew things real well, so maybe I'll homebrew some monster stat blocks on stream, and then we'll build from there. And then I never got around to doing an actual play because I realized there are 1,000,001 actual plays on the internet already.
Wait, don't you do actual? You
I do an actual play with the Viva La Dirt League stuff.
I've watched you be a dungeon master. I've watched you do it I've watched you do it on. I've watched you do some one shots. I don't think I've ever seen when we first started talking. Yeah. And you were like, you might know Viva La Dirt League or whatever. And I was like, I have no idea what that is. I loved how excited you were that I knew you not from that.
Yeah, I was so excited, because man.
Because I still don't really understand what Viva La Dirt League is. I understand that they're a YouTube channel and they have a lot of views, and you run D&D for them sometimes, but I have no idea.
That's all there is to understand. They're a skit comedy series that does 3 to 5 minute videos about something, and they started off doing comedy skits about like working in a tech store. Or the two main series that they had was working in a tech store, and they call it Board, and then there's another series they do called NPC Man, or Epic NPC Man, which is kind of about being a merchant NPC in a game like World of Warcraft or something, like a massive multiplayer online fantasy game.
That's fun.
And showing things from his point of view, like the logic of being, what would it look like to the merchants of that game to see people coming through and like offloading absolute shit to them, and then stabbing them and stealing all their money and running off. Just like silly, funny comedy skits about like from the logic of the video, the perspective of the merchants in those games.
Yeah, I like
and
that.
then because it was set in a fantasy world, a mutual friend of ours said, I've got this dude who does D&D, and this kind of is a D&D-ish world. I think you might benefit from having like some D&D content with these same characters. And so we tried it out, and the people who were expecting like 3 to 4 minute videos suddenly getting like half-hour comedy, they were like, nah, not for us, fuck off. But then the people who really loved it really fucking loved it, and so they were like, well, they're the most fanatical engaged videos for the people who love them, so maybe we'll offshoot that onto another channel. And they started a second channel for the D&D related things, and we've been going for about 4 years now. And that channel's going really well, and it's going gangbusters even into the future. We've just got this new studio set up with like a tavern set that we can film the D&D in, and so we're doing all this other supplemental content and things. But at the same time, I need people to start realizing that I am an independent contractor that Viva La Dirt League hires to run D&D for them, and I am my own content creator and my own D&D professional in my own right, all over the internet at Robert Hartley GM. So for you to say like, oh, I'd heard about your stuff and I have no idea who Viva was, I was like, I'm making it. It's working. Yeah, I'm finally getting to the point where not every single person who meets me goes, I love Viva La Dirt League. Which is fine. I'm always fine with people being like, I love Viva La Dirt League stuff. I love the D&D stuff. I'm really proud of the work that I've done with Viva. But at the same time, I'm really wanting to get to a point where people know me for me.
Yeah,
and not just for my work with them.
Especially us. Like, my friend, I quit a job where I worked half the time that I do, and now I work twice the time, and I make barely a third of the money that I used to make. Why? Because I'm a narcissist, and I want people to think I'm cool. I want people to be like, attention at me.
This guy.
I don't want them to be attention at a thing that I work on.
Yeah, precisely. Me. Love me, please. But there's something in me that needs it.
Yeah, not to pat each other on the back too much, because that could get really obnoxious really quickly. But I do think that you do that well. Like, truth of the matter is, when I go to the D&D Twitch to see what's on, I either go to a channel where I know the people that are running it a little bit, which is not that many people. There's like very few. Or I look for somebody that's not playing D&D.
Yeah.
I look for somebody that's like somebody talking about D&D. Because I don't want to listen to a half D&D game where there's just like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you don't want to tune into an actual play you've got no idea about. You're like, okay, what's the context? Somebody in the chat give me, especially if it's like one of these that's got like a dead chat. One of the first things I'll do if I do end up in an actual play is go, hey everybody, what's going on? Somebody fill me up to date on like what's the scene that we're currently in. There's obviously a tiefling talking to some sort of archlord. What is this, a devil or an archfey or what? I don't have the context. And if
I
it's
don't.
if it's an actual play where somebody in the chat goes, "Oh, hey, welcome in. This is the story so far," or they've got like a command set up for like exclamation mark recap, and it tells you what's going on, then I'm like more likely to actually stick around and watch. But for the vast majority of things, they don't have an engaged community around the actual play. They don't have like people there watching, moderating, keeping an eye out for new people coming in, and so that's why they're not growing.
Yeah. And well, and it's, I mean, it's just, I understand it because it's so hard to do. It's why I'm not trying to do it right now because you have so many pieces. I like being, I don't like doing content. I put on a bit of a show where I pretend to be a disheveled, crazy person most of the time. But at the end of the day, that's all very intentional. And I want things to be of a certain caliber or I don't want to be a part of them a lot of the time. And I struggle with that. But I think about it with D&D, there are so many pieces because there's all of that. There's the like, how do you bring in new people when you're 10 episodes in? That alone is very hard. But then there's also like, how do you make sure everyone has good chemistry? How do you make sure the players understand that they're performers as much, maybe even more
so,
than their players a lot of the time? And how do you navigate? Like, there's just so many uncertainties that it's like, unless you have a team around you, it's a struggle.
Oh, for sure.
Struggle.
Like, people are. I think most people understand on a base level that like adapting a book for a movie there has to be certain changes. Some people who don't understand that are often complaining about, well, they didn't even get this right in the book, and this is what he said in the book, and this is how he said it in the movie, and this is a character that's described this way in the book and this way in the movie and stuff. But most people who have any understanding about movie making or just different forms of storytelling understand that there is a difference between the different media. But a lot of people who want to start an actual play don't realize that that same thing applies for a D&D game in person with your friends and nobody watching to putting on a production. As soon as you say, I'm going to stream it or I'm going to put it out there for the audience, unless you are just interested in having 7 people watching and never growing more than that, like that, maybe that's all you're doing it for. But if you want any kind of growth, if you want people to be involved, you need to acknowledge that you are now a production, not a D&D game anymore. It's a production of a D&D game, and so you need to be aware of that.
I spend a lot of time, and I was talking to Zach. You know Zach. He speaks Giants.
I speak Giant.
he thinks he speaks Giant, but if you've heard him, he's trash at it. But he and I were talking about this.
He just knows a few swear words in Giant.
Yeah. He knows. He knows. You know what? He knows enough to get by. He knows enough to find like the bathroom
he's
or
got
to ask prices.
He's got a giant pass book. Yeah, pass for his book.
Yeah. It's huge stone slabs with just big runes carved into each one. He just carries around. It's on his back.
I would like.
Okay. When you run speaking of giants, when you run a giant in D&D. How do you handle it being so tall? Like when you're having people fight it, are you always having them hit its ankles? I think about this all the time.
Usually, yeah. So I had a giant fight where the fire giants were like doing this trial essentially with them. It wasn't a fight to the death, and so they beat the shit out of his legs and stuff and took him down. And then he fell over, and as soon as he was down, they got to stab him. And one of the monks, I've told this story a dozen times. It's amazing. She was on 4 hit points. Yeah, she had 4 hit points left. And they were fighting one of those tower shield giants with the lava inside of the shield. And it does fire damage if you come into contact with the shield. If it does a shove attack, it takes fire damage and piercing damage and bludgeoning damage because it's a spiked lava shield. But she is a monk above level 9, so she can now run up walls without falling. And so she goes, can I run up his shield to get to his head and stab him in the head with my dagger of giant slaying? And I was like, you're running up a lava shield, you're going to take a d6 points of fire damage. And she goes, I'm going to do it. So on a 6, I could have rolled a 4, 5, 6, and she just dies before she gets to him. Or 1, 2, 3, and she gets to land on his face and stab him in the eyes with a dagger, a giant dagger. And so she rolled for it, and she got a 3. She took 3 points of damage. She's on 1 hit point as she runs up this shield, lands on him, and just starts knifing him in the head. So eventually he's like, all right, this is not a fight to the death. And so they said, like they called it, and the giants were like, that was very giant of you, because giants don't care about good and evil, they care about giant or not giant, and the behavior of them, and was like, that was a very giant thing to do. So good job, we trust you. And the giants like became friends with them at that point. They sent them on this quest, but then on the quest they were talking about the giants, and they were like, they are evil giants though. They are doing evil things, and they had a bunch of slaves with them and stuff. So I think once we finish this quest, we're gonna go back and kill them for real. And we know that we can defeat them now. Blah blah blah. We've already fought them once, so we can do it again. But what I'd done in the meantime was like, the giants had realized that they had not got enough protection of their lower legs, because these tiny people, they used to fight other giants, and so they had all this armor on their upper bodies, and it wasn't and so by the time they went back, the guy was basically shirtless, but he had his like huge greaves on his legs, and he was walking around with these big old tanks and so I'd put his armor class way up against them, and they were like, crap, unless we've got ranged weapons now, we basically can't hit them. So that's how I deal with it.
That's a good way of doing it. That's a good way of doing it. I think about that a lot. Large creatures when you're not large. Because you don't really think about, like, what does a critical hit that takes away half the hit points of a monster mean if that is done to their hand? You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
You know, like how do you make that work? I don't know. I think about that.
I consider if any creature goes. If any creature takes half the hit points or more in a single turn, I consider it like a chance that their body is going into shock, and like you can do that at any part of your body. You can hit a critical nerve, and the damage done suddenly like sends your whole system into shock, even if it's not just the physical damage to these particular cells. Like the body is a connected network of blood and stuff, and so the blood loss from the huge open wound of you've hit an artery in your hand, in your arm that is like gushing blood, and suddenly you're feeling woozy. And so I roll on a massive damage table if you do half a damage, and there's a chance they just drop straight to 0 because the body just passes out, sort of thing. So I always think about it as a connected thing. Or like you've hit them in the nuts or something, like something where it's like a small part of the body, like an Achilles heel, where it's like, oh, that if you hit them there, suddenly you've done more damage than you would have expected for this tiny portion of their body.
What's the biggest monster you've ever run? Because you do have some giant minis behind you that I'm so jealous of.
I've got some big ass dragons and some giants down in the corner. Biggest monster I've ever run. I don't think. I once ran a rock fight with some of the kids that I was running for. And the Rocks are, for those who don't know, he's a wrestler from the 90s and early 2000s.
Wait a minute. No, I thought it was a film about Alcatraz with Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Dwayne Johnson was in that, wasn't he? They were all just the movie was just on him. He was just lying down, and Sean Connery was just.
They were like, "I'm sedimentary. I'm metamorphic."
Such a nerd. The ROC rock is a bird from Egyptian lore, I think it is. It's like 200-foot wingspan, and so no mini you could possibly have is sufficient to actually have the size of this beast that is meant to.
It would take up too much of the map.
Like it carries away elephants to have a snack on, sort of size. It's got you get to the nest of a rock, and it's several dozen meters wide, and it has like ships and ship masts making it up instead of twigs. It's a Boeing, it's a Boeing. So I ran one of them once, and I used it was before I had Big Girl, this white dragon here. But hiding at the back there is my big boy. I have a command. Maybe I wonder if I've still got that command. I haven't used it in a while. Let's see if it comes out. So see if anybody uses the command. It hasn't been used in a while.
I don't even know what you're talking about, but I'm excited to see. Oh, careful!
There it is.
Oh, look at this! Oh, what a lovely little feller.
Yeah, he's got a little cat collar.
Is that a mechanical dragon?
It is. Yeah, it's from a big boy. It's from Icewind Dale.
Icewind Dale. Yeah.
What are they called again? A Shardolin dragon.
I don't know. Who cares?
Exclamation mark! Big boy is Rob showing off his 8-inch big boy. Yeah, that's right. I used to show off my 8-inch big boy all the time because it's got an 8-inch diameter base plate. So I used this for the rock, and it's even small on that scale as well. Like a rock's even larger than that. But I had it do like, and this is the thing that I kind of wanted to get on to talking with you about in general, about D&D monsters and how you started.
I'm ready.
You started with 4th edition and moved on to 5th without kind of realizing it. You must have noticed a disparity in the monster stat blocks, right? Because
I did not, because I was a player when I played 4th edition, so I never saw monster stat block.
Right. See, but you fought monsters, so you never like started DMing in 5e and went, these don't feel as these feel lackluster compared to what I was fighting against.
I am not sure if I ever played over level 2 in 4th edition, and I was very present for the roleplay part and a little goofy the rest of the time. So like I remember there being interesting things where like monsters had like I remember there being this thing where like it was pretty normal for a monster to have a thing where it could like pick a zone and that zone could be affected in a way and it could like move how that zone was affected. And I don't remember exactly what that did, but in my mind I was like it's sort of like Moonbeam. Like when I learned about Moonbeam I was like, "Oh, like Moonbeam just does that." So, no, I mean, one of the main things I noticed in 5th edition when I got the monster manual, and it was like pretty early in 5th edition when I started to get into it, was that there is a shocking amount of monsters that the only difference between them is the numbers of the stats and the hit points and the AC. And there was like very little, like a hooked horror is a great example of that. The hooked horror is a lore-wise, I think, a really interesting monster.
Yeah.
They are these underdark turtle crab things, and they communicate by clicking their claws against their shells and stuff. But it's like you don't get any of that from the stat block. It's just like, oh, it's good at seeing in the dark, and it has a hook attack.
It can hook you with a thing, and that's different to a brown bear because a brown bear has claws, not hooks, and that's different to a giant because a giant's got a sword and not a hook.
Honestly, it impacted a lot of I think how I run the game. It also impacted how I write homebrew, but it made like when I run the game, if I need a monster, I sort of go into it with this attitude of I can pick any monster I want to make the needs of the monster that I need. I just describe it the way that I want. Like a goblin that had like for folks that don't know, goblins are they're just a little guy and they have a bonus action, hide or dash, I think. Hide or something else. And that's it. But that's all. Like if you need a little creepy monster that's good at hiding, just use a goblin stat block because it's super base. And that is a lot of D&D.
D&D,
but I will.
Unfortunately, as is at the moment in 5e, could be like I don't know 20 stat blocks for most of the monsters, and just be like just like leave them as unlabeled and be like unlabeled challenge rating 1 monster, unlabeled challenge rating 2 monster, because unfortunately with the monster design, this is a range monster. This is a melee monster. This is a range monster. Yeah, they're so like the reason I got into ranting about this was the rock stat block is a challenge written 11 or something, and it's got like 300 hit points, so some huge amount of hit points, but it's got a talon strike and a beak attack. It doesn't have anything to do with like using its 200-foot wingspan to like sweep you and knock you back. It doesn't have anything about like being knocked prone by some sort of beating its wings and
or like a screech. Could you imagine the sound of
it doesn't have a from that thing? It doesn't have like a thunderous like deafening thing. It doesn't have like it can come down and land on you and do a bunch of crushing damage. It doesn't have like a throw attack where it can like pick you up and just like throw you up in the air like you've seen birds do before they eat something.
Yeah.
It just misses any amount. It's just got, you can strike you with a talon or a claw, and it can only do 1 talon strike from memory as well. So
some of the later books I think are a little bit better. I think Mordekainen's Tome of Foes has some really good monsters in it.
I think they started around then is when they started going, the people are bored with these monsters. Let's make something have some interest.
But yeah, it was a thing that like I mean when I started writing homebrew, I sort of always homebrewed for my home games. I tried to run Curse the Mines of Phandelver, and I just couldn't. Like I got 3 sessions in, and then it became a different campaign because I can't do a module. Modules feel like I'm doing homework.
It is always the way. I've never played in a module to completion. In fact, I've never played in a module more than like 3 or 4 sessions before it becomes a homebrewed campaign.
I played all the way through Curse of Strahd with 3 or 4 guys, but I was not a dungeon master. I was the player, and it was a lot of fun. But I think the dungeon master really he's like a lawyer in real life, so he's like a big researcher. So he
Right.
like
Yeah,
loved
he's fine
using
with
all
reading
like,
huge blocks of text and taking it
and
in.
he was like going deep, and he was like finding all of this extra stuff of like different, because people have resources on resources of how to run
Yeah,
Curse of
yeah, yeah.
Strahd. So he had like archives. So that was I think it was a different beast by the time we were playing it. Um, but yeah,
I'm
I mean, a lot of
I'm
you
currently
first.
playing in a game of Dragonlance over on GM Workshop's channel, and that's like 27 episodes in or something, relatively weekly. And that's the furthest I've ever gotten into playing a module. But we had a session recently where a couple of the cast couldn't make it, so instead of running a game, we just had like a Q&A session, and people could turn up to the chat and just ask us questions about it. But we also got the chance to ask the DM questions about it, and we were and through asking him questions about like, oh, how is this part written in the book, and how is this part we realized most of our favorite moments of the campaign so far aren't even in the book, and he's just like and he's just like made shit up, and he's changed, he's included our backstories, and he's changed this NPC into somebody else so that it fits with our backstory, and then that NPC apparently is meant to die, but she's actually stayed with us as like basically a DMPC, and like this and that and the other, and we were like, oh, okay, so I still haven't actually played in a module.
Fair, fair. Rockham is such a good dungeon master. I've
He's
only
fantastic.
I've only played with him in this little mini arc that I'm doing with him right now.
Yeah,
I mean, we only have like 1 or 2 sessions left, but oh my goodness, that guy's a good dungeon master.
he is a good dungeon master, and he doesn't care about pulling his punches too much. Thankfully, his dice do that for him. He's got terrible luck with rolling, but
He made that joke, and it was true. It was crazy.
oh yeah, he's not lying. When he's got bad
He's
luck, he's got
legitimately bad
bad
at
luck.
rolling dice. It's so funny.
Even digital dice, he always comes out bad. Yeah, so I have been interested for that reason to run a module one time. I think like as I've got an idea for a project that I want to run at some point, maybe make it just like a short series, maybe like 12 episodes or something like that. Have an end date in mind so it's not too boring. But like to run a module and to specifically try and stick to it as much as possible and not put homebrew into it and see how hard it is to actually run an off the shelf module and make it interesting. I'd be fascinated to do that at some point. So
I would play in one. I would have zero interest in doing that. That sounds like, hey, why don't you do a less fun version of the thing that's fun? That's like, hey, do you want? That's how that sounds to me. Do you want to play basketball but deflate the ball a little bit? You know?
Which is kind of the point that I'm at in my career. I'm like, let's see if I can make this. Let's see if I can give myself. It's like people who do. It's like people who do video games, but like they're not allowed to die. They've put like weird challenges on themselves to make it like.
Yeah. I guess that's true. Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I guess, is that I'm so professional. I'm such an expert at D&D now that I have to add in extra challenges to make myself shitter. That's what I'm saying.
Wait, to go back to monsters for a second. One of the things that I think about a lot, because do you still do a lot of homebrew or no?
Oh yeah, I make stuff.
I do it a lot too. I actually don't do it super publicly. I just do it a lot for my home games, and then I do it a lot for like my Discord, or like we'll do like a stream where it's like, hey, let's talk about making a bard, and we'll build a bard subclass or whatever. But one of the things that I think is a good way for the folks at home to think about making a monster is you got to think about building a monster less so like I'm creating a creature that sits in the realm, but think about it for what it is. A monster in D&D is a tool for creating a specific encounter or for telling a specific story.
Yes.
So I feel like it's almost worthwhile to know the vibe of the encounter you want first, whether it's a mechanical vibe or an aesthetic vibe, or the vibe of a story you want first, and to build a monster to fit that thing.
Yeah.
And you can get super specific with mechanics in ways that are like really unique and bizarre if you do that. And the cool thing is if you start with like the goal from a more of a heady, like philosophical, like what do I want this to feel like perspective, you can hit the nail so hard on the head because it's like it tunnel visions you into a really weird direction, and you're gonna end up making something that is not gonna work in 80% of situations, but will be, if you write it well, it will be understood by the people that are reading it in a way that they will understand the situations that it is intended for, and it will work very well in those situations. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any monster stat blocks Do you have any monster stat blocks that are proper ones that you really love or really like?
I was really proud of my hags. So recently for the Viva La Dirt League campaign, I say recently, God, it's when Wild Beyond the Witchlight came out. Wizards got in touch with us and said, like, would you do some sponsorship for Wild Beyond the Witchlight and include that into your campaign? And it's a homebrew campaign, but I was like, I'm not just going to uproot it and make it a Wizards official thing, but I'll take the elements and I'll take the things that they want from it and I'll include it. So I was like, what's important to include? And they were like, a Feywild setting, the hags, a hag coven of the Hourglass, and Zybilna, and there's a Jabberwock or whatever. And I was like, okay, I'm including those things then. But I'll set it in like a mystical forest rather than the Feywild, and I'll have the hag coven, and that's pretty much it. And so I looked at the hag stat blocks. In fact, I didn't even look at their stat blocks because at the time that they asked me to do it, I was like, "Great, yeah, let me do this and this and this for you. Give me the information." And they're like, "No." I was like, how the fuck do you want me to include the Hourglass Coven hags if you're not going to give me their stat block? We haven't actually made their stat blocks yet, so it's, all right, you're really hamstringing me here. So let me come up with something. So I came up with my own stat blocks for the Hourglass Coven. And I don't know how familiar you are with that particular module, but they're basically a trio of hags that are hag of the past, present, and future. And they all have a specific thing that they're weak to, and they all have a specific thing that, I can't remember, something they can do essentially on their turns. Then I looked at their stat blocks when they came out, the official ones, and I went, oh, I mean, I'm not surprised, but those are lackluster compared to mine. So I just went ahead with using mine anyway, and I'm super happy with them because the hag of the present had something like I gave each of them like a unique feature, a unique action, and a unique reaction that they could do that was related to past, present, or future. So the hag of the present had a feature called I was thinking the same thing. And so if she sees somebody do an action, she can choose to immediately interrupt with a reaction to do the exact same action. So if somebody else makes a cleaving strike with a great axe and rage damage and everything, she temporarily becomes them, and at the simultaneously as they're making the strike, she can also do the same strike with a great cleaving great axe and do the exact same amount of damage and stuff. And at one point, the rogue jumped into a monster and did like an exploding amount of damage with sneak attack, and he like rolled really high in his sneak attack, and he was super excited. And then she goes, and then I went, I was thinking the same thing. And he goes, oh shit! And then she jumped into him and exploded him with all of this like sneak attack damage and stuff. That's awesome. And then the hag of the past had a feature called like I remember things differently. Where she could basically force a reroll on something that had just happened. Like it happened, she got to see how much damage it played out for or whatever, and then decide after the fact, nah, I don't want that to have happened. And so she could like just jump back in time like 6 seconds and redo a minute. Or she was like retrace your steps was another one of her things where she could target a person and force them to go back the route that they'd moved on that turn, incurring any attacks of opportunity too. Like they would walk backwards and be rewound into the past like where they were. And so she could take attacks of opportunity on them as they did that and stuff like that. Hag of the Future had some really cool things, but they ended up getting to the Hag of the Future after murdering the first two and then going, let's try a diplomatic approach. And they managed to make a deal with her, and so she just left without them having to fight her, so they never got to see any of the Hag of the Future stuff. But I got a lot of very fun stat blocks. I'd love to actually send them to you and have get your thoughts on them.
Please. Would you want me to give you the thoughts that in the way that I do when I'm on stream?
Yeah, critique them for sure.
All right.
I want to do it.
I will say I
like the way you critique because
when I critique homebrew, I have. Sorry, I keep talking over you. What were you saying? You will often what, good sir? Tell me.
Watch your shit and go, wow, he thinks the same way I do, or he says the same stuff that I do, or he's got the same eye for detail about like the wording. Like one of the things you pick up on often is like, look at the wording that a thing like you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Look at the wording you're trying to do a thing.
It's really important. It's because D&D language is not English. It's like lawyer language. It's
they've like set things out in a specific way so that you can avoid loopholes and go like, okay, if you word it in this way, then somebody could argue that this thing doesn't quite work with this thing. But if you word it in the same weird roundabout lawyery kind of words, then it's pretty unambiguous.
And there's another side to that too, which is one that I think is really important for anybody that wants to like homebrew outside of just for their own game, which is it is the difference. It's two things. It's the difference between somebody understanding your intention without you being there, because it's much easier for them to know what, like, if somebody misinterprets a mechanic that you put in a piece, then then it's no longer the thing you intended it to be. Like
Yeah.
it will change. Um, and then the other thing is, whenever you're doing any sort of creative writing, whether it's for D&D or for anything, as soon as somebody's brain is reminded that they're reading a thing, you failed as a writer, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
the goal is for somebody to dive in and to not remember that
Yeah,
they're
that's a good
reading.
way of thinking
And
about it.
and if you break the traditional language of D&D, it sparks something in our lizard brain that's like, this is not a professional. So even though obviously it's not a professional, they're just finding it randomly online or you're buying it from some third-party company or whatever, you still want the subconscious person to be like, this is good, because that is the difference between someone wanting to read the whole thing and actually use it, or skim it or not use it. Like it's so annoying, but it's so true. Layout and formatting and word choicing is arguably more important than the mechanics that you put into a piece.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, no one is going to read a Word document that's a big block that just sort of explains everything. But they might read that Word document if the font looks nice and there's bolded titles and it's broken up into little paragraphs, you know?
Depending on what your purpose is for it, I think. Like if you wanted to put it on DM Guild and like have people download it and use it, then I think you're right that like people are going to look for one that they can actually watch, that they can actually read and get through and take in. If you've got like a page of dialogue about this person's lore and then the stat block at the end, they're not likely to read that. If you've got like a half column of the dialogue with a nice piece of artwork down the side, if you split your page of dialogue over 2 pages and have like a half page of artwork or whatever, then they're more likely to actually read it and look at it and take it in and use the thing. I think if you're if you're wanting, if the whole point of it is to just make an interesting monster for you and your buddies, like if you want to get better at the homebrewing side of things and not the making people actually download and use your monster, then the formatting isn't as important. The mechanics are the thing that actually is going to make it interesting.
I agree to a certain extent, but I want to say that something that I've been thinking about a lot more recently is as important, I think, as the mechanics is the easeability of finding the thing that you need.
Yes.
So there is an element of formatting that I think helps you as the dungeon master navigate the piece at the table quickly. It's like, I don't want to have to spend every time I have to spend 30 seconds to find a feature. That's 30 seconds of people sitting and waiting, you know?
Yeah.
But I think about that. I think about it all the time.
I found that just in the most recent table session with Viva guys, I made some mechanics about them doing a thing. I won't spoil anything, but they were doing a particular adventurous quest, and I was like, "Oh, I made mechanics in case they did this particular thing," and I had to look at my notes and went, "Ah, shit." Really should have spent more time formatting my notes a little bit better, because now I can't find where it is, and dead air is not good, so they end up having to edit that out or whatever. But yeah, I 100% agree with that. Like there is an element of formatting even with your own stuff, even when you've made the thing. Unless you made it right before the game, you're probably not going to remember exactly the wording of everything you used.
No, and I see this a lot when people make like CR30 monsters and they give it like 1,000 features. It's like, oh, cool, you're gonna remember 4 of those.
Yeah,
you're not gonna use most of the stuff you put in the stat block, just so you know, because you're not gonna take a paragraph and a half to read every single one of these 17 things after initiative is rolled. That's like takes the wind out of the sails. Man, I see so many people send me homebrew, and it's their first time writing homebrew, and it's either a whole class or it's a CR30 monster. And it's like,
start with an item.
I appreciate I appreciate the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
But the equivalent in my mind is saying, I would like to learn how to ride a bicycle. So I think I'm going to start with a motorcycle.
I'm going to start with the Yamaha, yeah.
You know what I mean?
I used to do a thing before I just didn't have the time for it. I used to do a thing on my channel where you can use your Twitch channel points. You're earning the channel points passively just by watching. And then if you earned enough, you can redeem them for an It's Alive stream where I work with somebody to bring some of their homebrew to life in a very Frankenstein kind of way. And they would come in with an idea, I want it to be a lantern of friendliness. So it's a lantern that kind of like has charming, enchanting abilities and can turn people into friends in the aura of it. Kind of got Zone of Truth-esque elements, but charm monster elements. And I'd be like, cool, let's. And I would start the stream with like a bullet point list. What are the things that you find most interesting in this idea of yours? And then we'd go into it and actually flesh it out and put it into proper formatting and everything. And the number of people who didn't understand, because that you can redeem it at 3 different levels. You can redeem a 1 hour, 2 hour, or 3 hour stream with me to make one of these things. And the number of people who would be like, I'd want an hour stream because I'm just creating an item, and then they turn up with like a legendary sword of some god, blah blah blah, and it can do this and that, and it's sentient, and I'd be like, you're not doing this in an hour. We're not making a sword that's actually usable or interesting in an hour, because it's going to take forever. So yeah, the amount of time that people can put into a single homebrew thing is a lot more than a lot of people realize.
Well, it's also like it's just a matter of learning the fundamentals. It's like you have to learn. If you don't understand the basic power progression or intention behind a class or a subclass, you probably shouldn't. Like, I think if you want to make a new class for D&D, you need to very elegantly be able to understand and probably explain the point of every class in D&D.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And like if you can't elegantly articulate how each class is noticeably different, whether it's a martial class or a spell class or whatever, and where they sit in like the positioning of making them worth existing, and then you can't also say why your thing mixes with those things well, then it's not going to work. Because if you're building something like, because it's not a single player game. So like if you have to, if I want to play my blood demon mage that I made, it's a new class, I have to make sure, is it balanced compared to a barbarian? Is it balanced compared to a wizard? Is it balanced compared to a paladin? Is it balanced? And then sometimes people will come to me and they'll be like, I don't want you to review my whole class. I just want you to review the 7th level feature. And I'm like, okay. Like, that's like asking me if ketchup is good. Like, ketchup is really good with French fries, but I don't.
Is it good on ice cream?
That was fucking weird. That was weird.
I told you, man. I watch your stuff a lot and go, we think a lot alike. We had the same piece of feedback for that guy. Yeah, I don't want it in my ice cream. Yeah, exactly right. Like, so somebody going, can you just review the 7th level feature? It's like, out of context, no.
I can tell you if I think it's cool sounding.
Yeah, exactly. If it sounds like a feature that I would want to use, but if it's the only feature in the class that's any good, and then no, it's underpowered. And if you've got similar features at every other level in the class, then yeah, it's way too overpowered.
But on the other side of that, on the positive side of that, I will say that if you do familiarize yourself with the game and get comfortable understanding how all the classes fit, a lot of those ideas that initially start as a class idea actually work so amazingly well as subclass ideas.
Subclasses.
And they fit so nicely. And occasionally, I think that there is an idea that you stumble across that is like, this merits existing as a class. And it is so nice when you do bump into those. But I'll be honest, I've seen maybe 1 or 2. Very few.
I started with Homebrew super early because in my very first game DMing, one of the players came to me, a player who should have known better. I'm going to call him out because he was in the nerd community much longer than I was, and he runs a gaming shop and everything. And he came to me and was like, I want to play a druid, but I don't really like this and this and this about druids. I kind of feel like they should be like this and this and this. And I was like, yeah, I kind of feel like they... One of the things was like when you wild shape and get all of the extra temporary hit points of that creature, and then when it dies, it just reverts to you. He was like, it kind of feels like you're displacing yourself and just substituting in an animal rather than you becoming the animal. And so I kind of worked with him, and he was like not as interested in the spellcasting element of druids, but he really wanted to focus on the wild shapes and getting like more abilities when he wild shaped, even more so than like the moon druid. And so I basically homebrewed a druid hybrid class where he was kind of like a 3/4 class caster, but he had all these extra buffs for being a druid, and he was just the weirdly broken thing because it was my first time playing, and suddenly I was like homebrewing an entire class, and I didn't know any better. And it was far into the game when I eventually was like, we have to get rid of this character.
Yeah, yeah, we gotta kill this guy off. I will say though, that is one of the two things that I can think of off the top of my head that I think do merit existing as a class, because I think they don't sit in the action economy of the game right now, and I think that they would be really fun. And I had other people disagree with me on this, because a lot of people I think feel like a class should almost feel like you could do it as an occupation. But then I say sorcerers, and then they say I don't like sorcerers, and then I say shut up, nerd. But these are the two things that I want to be classes, and I would also say both of these could be subclasses. But I think that you could flesh these out as classes. One, a shapeshifter class, a class that is entirely devoting to shapeshifting, whether that's I get big or I get little, like manipulating the body or changing into different types of things. But I feel like shapeshifter class, you could definitely make one of those. The other one is like a summoner class that is like a single summon class, like Ash and Pikachu, something like that. Like you have a monster that fights for you.
Yeah.
I feel like that could work too. And I've seen a couple of those online, but I feel like both of those sit in a space where I'm like, I could see this working as a class, and I could see an argument for them where I don't feel like I'm like, just make it a fucking fighter. Just make it a fighter. So many of these things could just be a fighter. Just so many of them.
Yeah. I hate summons though. As a dungeon master, I just hate.
I know
summons.
that's why I'm saying you do the one. You do the one.
Yeah, just the single one that it does really well.
It wouldn't be a spellcaster. It would be like you have a pet. It would be like the devoted. You have the pet. It's like and your buddy.
One thing I've seen a lot of people trying to do as well is like non-magic healers, like a doctor class or like a surgeon class or someone who can like heal out of combat or in combat without using magic. And I'm like, I see the desire for it because I've definitely thought about it myself, but like I don't think it merits being a whole class. I feel like again,
it's a
subclass of fighter, like someone who's like a battle
or rogue.
Medic. Or rogue, rogue would be a good one for it. Even monk, like they tried to do healing type with monks, healing hands, but it doesn't really have the same feel to it as somebody who's just really good at medicine and like stitching up your legs in quick time, single 6-second stitch.
I'm gonna be honest with you. When I'm in review mode for my show, I try not to push too hard into saying what I'm interested in personally versus not, because I want everyone that's submitting homebrew to feel like I don't want anyone to feel like I don't like their piece. I want them to maybe feel like I don't like the way that it is presented or the mechanics, but I don't want anyone to think I don't like their idea. So I try not to be like, this idea is a bad idea. Maybe it's a bad execution of that idea. But I'll say here, because there's probably not that many of my audience here, I have zero interest in a class that's like, I'm a normal guy, like an intelligence-based non-magic user, where it's like I'm a cartographer or I'm a doctor.
Yeah, right.
I'm the most boring, so boring. Like, no, man, no. I have zero interest in it. So whenever I see someone, and I made fun of somebody last night because they sent me a bulwark fighter, which is like a fighter. They want it to be like a fighter that fights with shields, and immediately I was like, this is the most boring fucking thing I've ever read. And I didn't start reading it yet. That's just what I said in my head. And then when I actually read it, I was like, okay, I actually liked the mechanics and I could see how it worked. It ended up being way better. Personally, I ended up way liking it more than I thought I was going to. So I think they did a pretty good job on it. But those sorts of ideas I have zero interest in. So whenever I'm doing homebrew or whenever I'm writing my own homebrew, I'm always trying to think about monster. Like most of my homebrew is like, how do I make a bard into a monster? How do I make a fighter into a monster? That's almost always the goal. So like, I do a lot of subclasses when I'm homebrewing. I used to homebrew a lot of monsters. And the way that I used to homebrew monsters was I would do one of two things. I would text my siblings and I would ask them to send me weird combinations of animals. So they'd see like turtle, giraffe, and I'd be like, cool, I'm going to make a turtle giraffe monster. And I would do that. And then the other thing is that I would pick planes of existence and try to think of animals that would exist naturally there. So I made a bunch of different monsters that I thought could exist in the plane of air, or a bunch of different monsters that could exist in Mechanist or whatever.
I did a similar thing with in one of my games. They went to the plane of Earth recently, and I was like, Earth elementals, a single one, boring. What's going to happen in the lore is that people of the material plane don't see them that often, so they just combine them all into one and say Earth elemental. In the same way that back in the medieval times, they would have just been like, oh, he's an Oriental guy. Like they would have just combined everybody from the East and been like, I don't know anything don't know any different. But if you actually go over there, there's huge differences between all the different cultures and races and whatever. And similarly, when they went to the plane of Earth, they realized there's quicksand elementals and there's glass elementals and there's sand elementals and there's mud elementals and there's dirt and there's clay and there's rock and I split all of the elementals into like 16 different types of Earth elementals, and then And then I was like, fuck, now I need to come up with all of the stat blocks for each of those things and different cool things that they can do.
Yeah, but that's fun. I mean, I feel like if somebody at home is trying to do homebrew, that's a really good place to start. Starting with a blank page is kind of difficult, especially if you want to have, because every monster should have a goal. Everything should have a goal, really. But like, if you're like, okay, Earth, like Earth Elemental, for example, if you go to the plane of Earth, immediately you have so many parameters to work within that you can come up with some really interesting ideas. So like, okay, I have to think about all the different ways that Earth expresses itself. So what should a mud elemental do versus a sand elemental versus a magma elemental versus a lava rock element? You know what I mean? Like you break down into these little nuances, and then you can find such interesting expression of mechanics within those nuances. So like I love making monsters from Mechanus. I think Mechanus is a really fun place because it's just the place of extremes. It's like everybody has a job. So I just need to think of I just think of a job, and then I build a monster that's what it does. It just does that job to like a crazy extreme.
The janitor monster.
One of my favorite monsters that I made was a sorter. It sort of looked like a big tripod with like 8 or 9 claw arms coming off of it. And the claw arms didn't do any damage. But the claw arms had a pretty long reach, and every single turn, every creature that it had grappled with its claw arm, it could move anywhere else within its reach.
Nice.
And the idea was, in the real life, what it does is it sorts things like, really quickly. But in the game, it's like you can completely.
It's like, no, fighter's over here now, and Ranger, I don't like him being so far away, so I'm going to pull him real close to me and give him disadvantage on ranged attacks. It's like the that's actually really fun, because I love, one of my favorite spells, sort of circumstantial spells, is the scatter spell, where you can just target 5 people on the battlefield and put them wherever you want them to be. Because you can just be like, I don't like this guy being here, so I'm going to put him up on that roof. Or put him on the other side of that river of lava or whatever.
Scatter is a really fun. Yeah, scatter is really fun. Really fun. Do you ever make subclasses or no?
Not so much. No, I haven't really delved into the class and subclass stuff since I was burned with the druid. Tell you, that druid though, that homebrewed that I called it. The homebrewed is the homebrewed was really not. It never worked out as a playable character. But in my game that I run here on my channel called Twitch Tales, where the Twitch chat is the only player in the campaign. It's just me and the chat, and I'm running the game, and they are controlling, like as a hive mind, they're controlling a solo character essentially through the campaign. That character recently met up with my other world, because it's set in the same world as all of my homebrew games are all running. It's all sort of a simultaneously all over the world kind of deal. And they happened to cross over paths with him, because I knew that the player never got a chance to play with me anymore, but I wanted his story still included in the world. And so they met up with him as an NPC. And as an NPC, the homebrewed works well, because now he doesn't have to abide by player rules, and he doesn't have to be a member of a party and feel like weird balance, like this guy in the party's got way too many powers, or he's underpowered or whatever. Now he's just an NPC, so I can have him do whatever powers the hell I want. It's very fun.
I like that a lot. When you're running Twitch Plays D&D, how much are you talking to yourself, and how much are you narrating the scene?
I try to avoid having conversations with NPCs and talking to NPCs as much as possible, but I am also voicing the main character whenever they tell me what to say. People in the chat will put in quotation marks what they want the character to say, and then I will say it in character for them. When I was first starting out with Twitch Tales a while back, I debated, I think I put it to the chat like as a poll, do you guys want me voicing it, or do you want it to be like silent narrator kind of style, where you say the things and so that you can imagine that Apis sounds like whatever they sound like. But they were like, no, we want you to do the Scottish accent. So I speak as Apis, and then I speak as the NPC in return.
Your Scottish accent is very good.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm pretty proud of my accent work. I've been doing accents my whole life.
I am not good at accents. I'm always impressed with you. Every now and then I see like clips of you, or I hop into one of your streams, and you're doing a voice, and I'm like, that does not sound like him. Like, I know he's a New Zealander. I can't do that. I can do goofy I can do like, the quality of my accents are like, if I'm doing a British accent, it's like a Monty Python British accent.
Right.
Like,
yeah, I think that helps a lot with the talking to yourself as a dungeon master that's running to Twitch, because then I can differentiate the people that they're talking to. in any particular scene, if there are 3 NPCs, and there are a couple of people who end up like tagging along with the party to make sure that there's not just like a single person TPK. And so there's a couple of like there's a companion animal that they have, a giant bee called Mel, and she speaks with this and because she speaks in Sylvan, and Sylvan is based in French in my worlds, she speaks with this sort of buzzy voice, but it's got a French accent to it, and so she speaks like this, and hello, and
That's
so it's
great.
very obvious when Mel is talking. And then if they're talking to an Elvish in my world is based on Welsh, so suddenly I have to go into a Welsh accent, and so it doesn't make it very difficult for people to follow along and realize who's talking, because I'm putting on a voice, I'm putting on an accent,
Oh
and then
man,
suddenly
I'm
talking like this again, and it becomes very clear who is talking now.
They would all just become the same accent for me. It would just mush together. The tones I could do, like the scraggly versus not scraggly, I can bounce between those really quickly. But like the nuances of like where the way your mouth moves, and like where the different like emphases sit and stuff, I'd be out the window in a second.
Yeah, I've done a lot of work. I used to be an actor, and I went through drama school, and I did a lot of work on voice and learning how to do accents.
How's your South African accent?
South African's not as good as the others, because I never actually heard any South Africans talking until I moved to New Zealand. I was born and raised in England, and we don't have a lot of South Africans in England, but there's a lot of South Africans living in New Zealand.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
When I moved to New Zealand, I heard South African for the first time, and I thought, are they trying to do Australian and doing a really bad job? Because it's sort of like Australian but clipped. There's definite interest. Interestingly, I was trying to learn to do the Dutch accent recently, and it's quite a hard one. It's sort of like a little bit German, but also a lot like South African, which isn't surprising because a lot of people in South Africa were Dutch. There was a lot of Dutch settlers. So there's quite a lot of overlap between Dutch and South African. So I don't know.
I think it's a good South African, dude. That's sick. I love it. The South African accent is maybe my favorite English-speaking accent. I love how it sounds so much. That's such a cool accent. I don't know why, but I love it. I'm all about it. I don't love apartheid, but I love the accent.
I don't think that needed to say. I don't think anybody needs to clarify.
No? All right, just checking.
Just checking.
Just making sure. Just putting out there. I'm not trying to be too political. I'm not trying to say anything too controversial. But apartheid, not that good.
I'm gonna go on record. You know, I'm gonna go on record. Are you ready for this hot take? I don't like apartheid. I don't like this thing that was abolished in the 80s. I'm a fan of German. I'm a fan of Germany, and I'm gonna go on record and say I was not a fan of what the Nazis did.
No, not the best. Not the best. Not the best. Nice.
So
hats,
so
but not
so
the best.
so what do you? So what do you focus on when you are doing character voices and trying to differentiate them and stuff in your games?
I think a lot about the pace that they talk and like the tone, and I do very subtle accents that I can kind of just make. So like, for example, I will do like a little bit of a Southern accent, or I will have the character just talk very fast, or I'll have them aggressively interrupt people, or I'll have them almost, I think a lot about sort of everything else other than the accent.
Yeah.
I also will hold myself really differently, and I don't know how. I haven't really done, like, I don't know how it would express itself in streaming, but like if I'm playing D&D with my home table or in person, my body contorts a lot depending on who I'm being. Like if I do a lot of like, I'm sitting up like this, or I'm like leaning down like this, or things like that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a big fan of simple voices that I can maintain. So because the thing is, at the end of the day, I think what matters more is that you're doing a good job of consistently portraying the character and how they express themselves and the things they say and the actions they take. I think that is going to be what sits in players' minds more than like making sure the voice is super good.
Yeah.
Like 100%. If the voice is super good, but what they do is just nothing, or it's like I'm not having them act naturally for the way that they exist because I'm too focused on getting the voice right. It's to me, it feels the same as what you said earlier about like your notes not being formatted.
Yeah.
Like it's like, it doesn't help the game. I spend a lot of, as I've been playing the game more and more, I'm realizing more and more that there are so many things that I don't need to care about because the goal is fun. And if you're accomplishing the goal well, then that's all that matters. So like you don't need it's good to always improve, and it's good to work on stuff that you want to work on, but there are a lot of things that people feel like they really need to do to be a dungeon master, and
Yeah,
you don't need to
and you
do
don't.
so
Yeah,
many of those things. So
yeah.
many of them.
I'm going to be doing some panels at PAX Australia this year, and one of the panels that was accepted was my voice coming up with a voice for RPG characters essentially, and with a couple of other performers, Ellie from Roll to Cast and AJ Winters from Winter's Tales. We're going to be talking about voices, and one of the things that I often do when I'm talking about voices is I say you don't have to be good at accents for all the same reasons you say, like the pace that they speak at, the vocabulary they use, your body language. All of this is just as vital for coming up with a memorable and important character in the player's minds. But you also need to come up with, why the hell are the players going to go and talk to this guy again? Like if he was just a baker with a funny voice, they'll go back and see him when they're in town to be like, haha, don't you remember that baker with the funny voice? But other than that, they're not gonna want to bring him along for the quest. They're not gonna go to him for like between quests for like other side quests, or for like offloading their valuables to. They're not gonna use him in any way unless that NPC is memorable and useful. They're not actually you're not actually gonna keep coming back.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I think that the usefulness is something that I think about a lot and comes up a lot in streams for me. My streams basically consist of one or two types of shows. I'm either reviewing people's homebrew, or I'm just talking about D&D, and people are either calling in or writing in questions. And a question that I get all the time is like, how do I make players role play, or how do I make players care about the NPCs more than just like, I buy this from you? And one of the things that I talk about a lot is you sort of have to trick them into it if they're players that are really trying to be video gamey. And one of the ways you trick them into it is you make the NPC legitimately useful. You make it so like, tell you what, make it so health potions don't exist. You can't buy health potions in the store, but there's an herbalist who can make them.
Yeah.
That herbalist is going to be really important to the players that are really interested in fighting and don't give a shit about roleplay, because they're going to know that NPC needs to be around so that they can get those health potions. So then if something bad happens to that NPC, or something is preventing that NPC from getting those health potions, that player is going to be compelled to like help. And then suddenly they are now role playing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's sort of like you wave a little candy in front of them, you know?
Oh, but this one though. Oh, and this one.
But that the usefulness is so important. It's actually very similar to homebrew, where it's like people, you know, when people write, when people design, when people do art, there is a hope that somebody will be excited by the thing you made because you put work into it. There's this feeling that we have that I put a certain amount of work into a thing, so it inherently is worth a certain amount to everybody. And that's just not true. Yeah. And it's the same for NPCs. It's like, it doesn't matter how much you love Dr. Fizzwimble and his cacophonous chorus or whatever. If you're you could have spent 2 hours on him, you could have spent 5 minutes on him. If there's no reason for the players there's no reason to assume the players are going to be interested in them. You have to sell them on the idea.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to sell them on the idea. It could be as simple as he sells cool stuff.
Yeah.
But if you don't,
like, as soon as you say that, as soon as anybody like says like a throwaway thing they just clearly made up on the spot, my brain goes, I need to include that in some way as a reference later that only I'm gonna remember. Like Dr. Fizzwimble and his cacophonous chorus. Somehow I need to include them in my Twitch Tales world.
Yeah, I have a character in a campaign in one of my Baldur's Gate characters is called Finn Widley, and it was a randomly made up name, but I love the name Finn Widley. Such a good name.
It's a good one.
Finn Widley.
I just want to point out to the chat as well. We're coming up to time, which really surprised me. I looked at the time we've been streaming. I was like, that can't be right. I thought we had another hour left. We're coming up to our time, unfortunately. So make sure to get in questions. If you've got any questions for me or for Cinder, you can redeem them in the D&D question redemption with the channel points. That way, if they go past in the chat without me looking at them, I will still have them on my list and I'll get back to them. There have been some that were submitted an hour ago.
Ask us things.
So ask the questions that you want to ask and we will get to them in a moment. What I want to chat about in the meantime, though, while those questions are coming in, is like the future of Cinderblock Sally as a channel. What you got in the horizon? What do you plan to do? What do you intend to do? And what do you hope to do one day?
I do not have any giant projects coming up that I know are happening, but I have things that I want to do and things that I hope to do. The things that I want to do, some of them are what I'm doing right now, which is stop being an island as a creator. I really want to start like working with and talking to other people that sit in similar headspaces to me. And I don't want to feel like I'm the one that has to drive the train all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I've been talking to Zach pretty regularly, and it's very refreshing to talk to somebody else that has a similar amount of passion / neurosis about trying to be a content creator.
Yeah.
And like to bounce ideas off of. So I'm just trying to be more social. I just don't know anybody in the space. Like even in like people that you sort of mentioned, then I don't know anybody. So I'm trying to meet people. I'm trying to like, hey, let's be friends to people.
Yay, I'm a bridge.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're more than a bridge. I
shall
do more than tread
island.
upon you. I shall do more than tread upon you, good sir.
Okay, I'm an island of my own with a drawbridge to your island.
Yeah, perfect. And then I have ideas that I want to do for larger projects. I'm just very hesitant to start putting a lot of work into something before I know it's going to be good. So here, I'll tell you a couple. I really want to figure out how to do running a D&D game on stream and incorporating Homebrew into it. So I'm not exactly sure what the format's going to be, but I want to do something where I either have a rotating cast of players or something where I'm running one-shots or mini arcs on stream where I am highlighting user-submitted Homebrew. So it would be like I get 4 players and I give them a bunch of Homebrew that was submitted by my community, and they pick their classes, subclasses, whatever.
Yeah, right.
And then people can kind of see stuff in action. I think that would be really fun. The other thing that I want to do... Yeah. The other thing that I want to do that I've always wanted to do, and I have no idea how to do this, but I love running D&D for people that don't normally play D&D. It's one of my favorite things to do. So I'm trying to figure out how to thoughtfully become a presence that people are aware of that aren't just in the tiny D&D space. So I could be like, hey, I know that you're usually this type of YouTuber, but let's do a D&D thing together. Because I think that would be a lot of fun. But other than that, I'm just trying to survive, man. I'm just trying to pay. Truthfully, I'm just trying to make enough money to pay rent next month. That is where I'm at.
That's the future. That's the future of this channel.
Cinderblock Sally. Barely clawing along.
Ain't it the way? I understand that entirely.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't have any huge projects going on.
We'll start answering some questions from the community. Then keep them coming in, and we'll keep answering them. An hour ago, Centauri asks, which one of you is definitely me, Centauri. Which one of you is going to win the D20 Deathmatch that we're fighting in tomorrow?
Oh,
well, tomorrow is it? No,
it's not tomorrow. But
day after tomorrow.
You live in the future or the past, so it doesn't.
Yeah,
when it is.
I'm currently on Saturday the 26th. Saturday the 26th
tomorrow
right now.
For you.
No, it's still the day after tomorrow for me because relative time is still the same. I
Are
don't
you
have
sure?
hours at the same. I don't have my hours aren't shorter than your hours.
Don't you guys do like 57 minutes an hour? Or something like that?
Yeah. It's because of time dilation.
Well, you sacrifice 3 minutes in honor of the 3 Lord of the Rings films.
That's the one. Yeah, each Lord of the Rings, every single day we spend a minute of silence every hour to each of the films. And then we ignore the Hobbit movies entirely because they don't exist.
Ignore them.
The Monday.
I'm so curious about your character. I'm so curious.
Monday the 28th is we're going to be over on another D&D Twitch channel called D20 Deathmatch, which is exactly as it sounds like. It takes a couple of D&D creators and it pits them together in a PvP fight to the death, and it is amazing. I've been on there 3 times, and to answer your question, Centauri, I'm going to win because I've been in I think 4 PvP Royal Rumble fight to the death type games in my life, and technically I am undefeated.
Can you tell me the name of your character? Because I don't want you to reveal anything you don't want to, but I am so curious if you could tell me their name.
I believe my name was Python.
Python?
Yeah.
That's a good name.
It is a pretty good name. Can you tell me yours?
Yeah, I'm Robbie Clark in The Hunger.
Oops, I've lost the audio. There we are. Robbie Clark and The Hunger. I love stuff. I love names that have like extra titles and stuff in them, like as part of the name.
It's gonna be
It's gonna be good.
The character came to me almost immediately once the rules were explained, and it's like you can kind of be anything. I'm like, okay, I have it.
I have an idea. Well, it's gonna. I think there's something about your name makes me think that there's gonna be some copacetic aligning of something.
Are you
that
literally a
goes down in the
Python? Okay, maybe there will be some similarities. We'll see. I'm not a Python. But my character does have some Python-y tendencies in certain ways.
I love it. We're gonna
That
have
sounded
some
way
interesting
weirder than I intended it to.
Python-y tendencies. So the funny thing was with D20 Deathmatch, they were like, "Hey, are you interested in being part of season 3? I think this is." And I was like, I've loved every time that I've been on your show. Absolutely. I'm trying to say no to more things, more collabs on other people's streams because I found out that I'd been on other people's streams more often than I'd been on my own stream last year. And I was like, holy shit, I need to actually put some effort into growing my own things. And collabs are fun, but they don't always actually show the growth that you hope them to.
And you make
and so I was
money
like,
too.
I was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, I'd love to be involved. I just have to kind of make it worth my while, sort of thing. And they were like, oh, we'll pit you up against someone that you maybe haven't met yet or don't know too well or whatever. And I was like, brilliant. And they put me up against somebody he pulled out or flaked on them or something. And so they went, oh, we'll scramble it. I'll put you up against. Have you heard of Cinderblock, Sally? And I was like, I'm going to be interviewing him like 2 days before. And they were like, brilliant.
Yeah.
So that's
I'm very excited.
Fortuitous timing. I'm very excited to see how you actually play D&D in person. So if you want to see Cinderblock and me fighting to the death in a D&D-like game. It's not exactly D&D because it's
D&D
PvP.
adjacent. It's D&D adjacent.
D&D adjacent. Then you can head over to D20 Deathmatch as well. That's going to be fun. Cinderfingers an hour ago asks... Cinderfingers...
They're my cousin. They're my cousin.
Yeah. No question here. Just a high five for Cinderblock, Sally.
I'll take it. I'll give it back.
There you go. Butt Poncho asked 7 minutes ago... Hey,
can I just say I'm gonna interrupt you. I'm so sorry, but Butt Poncho is the most childish joke name. You know what I mean? It's so like this motherfucker has such thoughtful ideas about homebrew.
Nice.
It's like the dumber usernames are, the more insightful people are. It's crazy. Like, you know, you see a username and you're like, okay, this guy's gonna be a little bit of a silly guy, and then he's saying all sorts of clever stuff. So,
hey,
good on you.
Running a one shot tomorrow. What do you do to spice up a green hag? Oh, my territory here. I love hags. I love hags, and I hate the stat blocks entirely. Hag stat blocks are so disappointing for the lore that there is. What do you do to spice up a green hag that likes to morph exotic creatures or eat them? Players would be relatively new to the game, so nothing super mind-boggling, but evocative to drag them into the hobby. The first thing that I recommend with hags, above all else, is hag magic has no relation to anything you can do with game mechanics or the spell slots and the spells of the game. Hag magic is designed to be weird and out there and different feeling to all other magics. So, like, don't be afraid to just... Monsters have no... obligation to follow player rules. Even if they're like a barbarian class NPC, they've got no obligation to follow barbarian player rules, because the rules are there for the players for a reason. It's a game, and so game mechanics are there to tell the story, and the game mechanics are designed in such a way that the players have to abide by them, because it's all designed around balance of that team. But the monsters don't have to abide by them. That being said, obviously don't give your monster infinite legendary resistances. But you can still you can break the rules quite a lot, and you can break them especially much with hags. You can be like, she doesn't have spell slots that she uses. She uses her own hit points for casting spells, or she uses the party's hit points. But like if she makes an attack and does 7 points of damage, she can, as a reaction, cast a 7th level spell or something. Like, I don't know. Like you can make things up. Don't do that one. That's a terrible idea. But but off the top of my head, you can. Even just like breaking the rules of like forcing saving throws with hags, like have a different mechanic that feels like they're all of a sudden playing a slightly different game, and it's like, I'm not used to the mechanics of this. What do you mean roll a roll a so-and-so check that there's a word you just made up. They're like, what does that mean? And you're like, well, what it means is you have to get up from your seat and walk around it 3 times. And then you can make them do some weird things that makes them feel like they're not even playing D&D temporarily, except every time it comes back to their turn, they're suddenly back into D&D. I love doing that stuff with hags especially, where it's like, this is, I don't know, it's different. So how would you spice one up that morphs exotic creatures? Maybe it's a case of... Maybe, it's a little late if you're running it tomorrow, but maybe I was thinking, suddenly the first thing that came to mind was like, go to like a $2 shop and get some of those plastic animals, or if you've got a bunch of animal minis or something, go to those, and put them all in a bag, and then have the players like reach in and grab one of the animals, and that's the animal she morphs them into. Like, so that it's, there's something a little different and the mechanics are out there and weird. I don't know. That was just off the top of my head.
My head went to the spot with the animal mixing of like the hag, like putting animal parts on people and then those parts attacking the people. Like the hag pointing at you and a wolf head growing out of your chest and it like biting your arm. And you have to like fight this, fight this animal that's growing out of you.
That's nasty stuff. Yeah, I like that. And then suddenly, like in the next round, you've got a huge rat tail grows out and wraps around your legs, so your movement goes to 0 because you're all restrained by your own rat tail.
That's a cool idea.
That's nasty.
That'd be a really fun monster.
Also, if modeling on a Rob hag make them unbelievably horrific and disgusting, just straight up gross and disturbing, that is definitely a route that I go down hard with my hags. So in one of my home games once, they fought a hag, part of a whole hag coven arc. They killed her, and so her house started to sort of immediately collapse in on itself and become a dollhouse. That's because she had thousands of magical items, of weird hag magic items around her house, and I didn't have the time to plan it. So I was like, I'm not going to give them time to loot this house yet, but I will give them a dollhouse with all of this stuff in it so that it gives me time to plan it, and then when they eventually work out how to attune to the house, they can grow it up again. And now they've just got a portable house, which I definitely don't regret. So they had this hag house. Eventually they got some downtime, so they set this house up and they went in and started cleaning it out. So I had tables of hundreds of items that they could look at and work out and try and identify, and the wizard's continually casting ritual while the others are like clearing things out and dealing with monsters and dealing with curses and stuff, and then bringing in the items, and he's ritually casting detect magic and identify on all these things. And some of the examples that stick in my head are, I give them a Heward's handy haversack, but it was a human female's torso that was cut off at the head, and her neck hole was the top of the haversack, and her breasts had like slits in the top, and they were the external pockets of this thing. And then her hands had been cut off. Her hands had been cut off, and her wrists had been stitched to her hips essentially, and it was just that was the torso, and her hands were the straps, and they were like, a Heward's handy haversack's a really handy item, Rob. Why would you make us carry this thing around? We're not going to do it. And so they like buried the item and gave it like a ritual burial. Another one was like a potion of climbing, but it was like a little squishy rat's brain, a gecko brain in a jar, and they had to chew this chewy gecko brain to get the gecko's climbing abilities. There were all sorts of weird things that they had to like. One of them was a pottle of the pigments. So those magical paints that you can... Marvelous pigments. You paint a thing and it comes to life. But it was in the head. It was in the skull of a halfling child. And they had to take the top of the skull off to get to the pigments and stuff. So all these weird things where it's like, these are really powerful items. I want to see if they're too grossed out to use them. One of them was like a finger, but it was a wand. All sorts of cool weird and wacky and gross things. And one of them, content warning, obviously for gross and disturbing things, particularly to do with children. One of them in one of the hag coven was an Annis hag. And if you look at the laws of the Annis hag, they are all about like being the granny and like it and corrupting children specifically and giving them like a coin through which they can talk to her at any point, and she can give them like really bad advice and like tell them, like corrupt them into setting fire to their house and stuff like this, and being just a generally bad child. And so the law all about her being like a corrupter of children. When they walked into her bedroom of this house, they realized that the carpet was scalps of children, and the walls were like leather wallpaper that was from the flayed skins of children and stuff. And then eventually they found her and killed her, thankfully. But she was wearing like child body parts on her as armor, and they were like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is wrong with this woman? Because I wanted to like drive home that this is an evil, not just an evil creature, but an evil creature on a scale and a level that you cannot imagine as a hag. I just love using hags as like really going into the lore of them and being like, if I'm going to use a hag, I'm going to use that hag for what it is, and like really giving them no moral quandary about whether it's okay to kill her or not. Like sometimes that's fun to give your players, to be like, is the bandit a real bad guy and he deserves to die for what he's doing, or is he just like a guy who's down on his luck and this is the only way he can pay for his family to survive, by stealing other people's stuff? Like, give them a moral quandary about whether it's right to kill them. And then other times it's like, no, just give them like a straight up, it's okay to kill this woman. She's a capital E evil.
You need that sometimes. You need that sometimes. It's cathartic. It's fun.
So yes, depend on. I should very much qualify this. Don't just straight up use that sort of thing with your hags unless you have done a very clear session 0 content warning thing with your players. You've gone through what is and isn't appropriate for them, any triggering things. I only used that stuff because I had already had a very clear conversation with my entire players at the table, saying what is and isn't appropriate for this game. What are you okay with me using in context, and blah blah blah. I would never use that stuff in a live game, an actual play, because there's an entire chat full of people that I haven't got the consent from to use that sort of traumatizing shit. Or if I did use it in a live game, I'd put content warnings out about it. Hopefully you've got something there, Butt Puncher. Butt Puncher also asks, what are your home rules in regards to returning from 0 HP, variant flanking, or something else that you always use? Let's answer those one at a time. Any homebrews around returning from 0 HP?
I don't use flanking at all. I make a potion an action to give a person, or a bonus action to drink yourself if it's a healing potion, so it requires a little bit to bring people back. But in terms of somebody coming back from 0 hit points, I kind of do it group by group. I have some groups that are way more casual, and they're not interested in more mechanics. They really lean into the role play, and if one of them goes to 0 and then they come back, that's like a dramatic moment. Even if mechanically it's not a big deal, like they will sit in that emotionally, and I don't feel like I need to give them a mechanical thing on top of it. But there are other groups that are like really, I have one group that's really crunchy, and I have recently started playing around with either having them come back with levels of exhaustion, but having those levels of exhaustion go away faster on a long rest. They don't like collect in the same sort of way. Or recently I've been thinking about doing something where death saving throws don't go away until you finish a long rest. So if you go down and you lose two death saving throws, you go down again, you have 1 death saving throw.
Yeah, gotcha.
But I don't do a lot with that. I'm gonna be honest. Most of the mechanics that I incorporate are very, very goal-oriented in a way that it really depends on the group. There's not a whole lot of mechanics that I feel like I use across the board, because I play with 2 groups right now in home games, and they're both pretty different. One is really crunchy, they're really goofy, and they really like, they just love, we're friends hanging out. We're friends hanging out. We're having a drink. The game that I'm running for that group, I call Battle World. This is a game that I might actually run as a show at one point. But the premise is basically Hunger Games meets Jurassic Park. A bunch of adventurers are thrown into a place full of crazy monsters, and they, in theory, have to fight each other and other adventurers to survive. There are literally like power-ups they come across. If they slay giant beasts, they get special rewards. So like the way that the way that they like get maps, which is really important because there's a lot of special locations, or the way that they get magic items is by slaying particularly tough monsters. So they don't have to do that if they don't want to. It's almost like side quests. And then there's other adventures and stuff, but it's very gamified, but in sort of like a meta way, and they love that. But the other group that I play, they want to talk to the rat that they realize used to be a human and now like, sells buckets by the river for like an hour, even though the rat has very little say. So I
know both parties very closely. Yeah,
and I love both. I love both. But how about you?
I the house rules. I have so many house rules that like part of my session 0 is like a going through the things that are how things work in my games. So like I don't use flanking, but I do use surrounded as a new condition where it's basically if you get 3-on-1, you have advantage. I didn't like the conga line sort of thing of flanking. So I basically, if you get 3-on-1 and it's a creature that makes sense for, obviously this case by case, you're not going to get advantage by surrounding an ooze. They don't have a forwards and backwards direction. They don't have a distracted side. But if you've got 3-on-1, or if it's a large creature, 4-on-1, or if it's a huge creature, 5-on-1, etc., then you get advantage on the attack. As for returning from 0, I'm trying, particularly lately, to avoid the skip a turn mechanic of game design, because generally speaking, skip a turn is a shitty game design idea. And so anything like stunned, paralyzed, unconscious, incapacitated, these are all things that are basically saying you don't get to play this turn. And when a D&D round can last like 20 minutes before it gets back to your turn again, that can really be shitty as a player. So I'm trying to avoid that sort of stuff. So in that vein, for my death saving throws, I at the very least, if they are unconscious and dying, at the very least I will say to that player, give me a memory of something that's happened in your life. Maybe your life is flashing before your eyes as you die here on the battlefield. What is a memory that flashes before your eyes? And they can choose to interpret that as like, it's a happy memory if they roll a successful save, it's a bad memory if they don't, sort of thing. It's up to them. If it's interesting enough, maybe we jump into that and like play a very brief scene of roleplay or something, and then we go back to the initiative, just so they feel like they're still involved in the game when it gets to their turn. The other ways that I do it is, I haven't actually implemented this yet, but I saw it recently. I think D&D Shorts mentioned it, and I was like, that sounds like a good idea. Basically, have them have the dying condition, but not unconscious. They are only able to crawl. There's only a limited number of actions they can take, and if they take those actions, they automatically fail death saves. So they can take the help action while they're dying to like give somebody advantage, or they like make a single attack, but they can take a death save to do so, and then they get that interesting scene that we otherwise miss out in D&D of somebody dying in your arms, and there's not much you can do about it, and they're like, taking my last breath to conjure this last spell, get out of here, I've got this, and they sacrifice themselves to whatever. Like, you get that if you give them this dying moment, I guess. That's something I'm thinking about doing, so that they can at least feel like they're involved on their turn, they're still playing the game on their turn. And then there's other house rules that are quite common, like the like using a potion as a bonus action. But the way that I do it is if you want to drink it very carefully and take the maximum amount that healing potion can heal you for, then you have to use your action to do it because you're taking your time. But if you want to chug it back and roll for it, then you might not get as many hit points back, but you can do it as a bonus action. If you're actually dead and not just on 0 hit points, if you're actually dead, then spells have to go through like a ritual to work. They don't just like, oh, I just cast this thing and death's not important in the game anymore.
Yeah, that's something that I got from Critical Role.
Yeah, same. Yeah,
I like that a lot. When I moved out of Baltimore and I was trying to start playing D&D, Critical Role was like early, like it was like 4 episodes in.
Right.
Like, yeah. I hit it like when it was starting.
Yeah, right.
It defined so much of like where I put import in the way that I thought about being a dungeon master. It's kind of crazy. And I don't feel bad about it. Like I don't feel like I was misled in any way. And in a weird way, you know how like there's the whole like there was like the Matt Mercer thing where it's like, you're not Matt Mercer, you're not a good dungeon master or whatever. Like I never had any of that.
No.
I feel like a lot of people did, but like for me it was like I'm just learning, man. It's like I don't know. Great times. Great times.
Likewise. I think maybe it's not a coincidence that you and I think a lot alike regarding the game and how it plays, because we were both so heavily influenced by Matt Mercer and Critical Role in our early days.
Well, also
I
those
got
early
into it real
days,
early, like 20 episodes in or something.
Yeah, those early days were when it was really still D&D and it was not really performance D&D.
Yeah.
And I like it being performance D&D more to watch it. But when I was starting it, I didn't want performance D&D. I wanted to watch a thing that made me feel like I was sitting and playing D&D. Like one of my favorite things to do when I was watching Critical Role was to have open the player's handbook and the monster manual and to like look up the monsters that he was having to fight and like seeing what the stats were. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I would literally pause it. I would literally pause it anytime that they would say, I'm going to cast Gust of Wind, and I'd be like, pause, Google Gust of Wind D&D.
Yeah.
What is this?
Same.
What is this spell? What does it do? Oh, okay. So it's a verbal somatic. What does that mean? Verbal somatic. Oh, okay. And then I'd go back and I'd be like, they didn't use the verbal component though. How does that? How does
Yeah,
that
yeah,
work?
and then
Oh,
you
you don't
complain
really need
quietly to
to.
yourself about it, and
Yeah.
doesn't make it. You don't leave a comment because you're not a fucking dick.
Oh, I was.
But
I was a fucking dick, and I would
oh,
leave comments and be
fair.
like,
Oh,
"Oh, that's
fair,
not
fair,
how it
fair.
works." And then, like 10 episodes later, I'd be like, "Oh, don't do that anymore."
Yeah, and then 15 episodes later, they turned comments off. But like one of my favorite things to do, and one of the things that I learned, one of the best lessons I think I learned from Matt Mercer is how to turn turning a monster into an encounter. Like there were so many times where it was like I've flipped past this monster 1,000 times and don't really think about it. It's not even particularly interesting to me. But the way he sets the stage for it, and then the way he describes it visually, and he doesn't even make up a new visual description. He's literally describing the picture he's looking at in the monster manual a lot of the time. And you're like, God damn, this is such a cool monster. And it's like, I didn't even realize it was cool because it was just presented as being cool.
Yeah.
But it's so much fun to like hear him describing the monster and then to flip through the book to try to figure out what monster he was describing before like the mini came out. And you're like, oh. And then if you're right, you're like, oh, I'm so smart. It's going to use this feature. And then if it didn't get that feature off, I was so annoyed.
Yeah.
I was so annoyed. I'd be like, God, I wanted to see it use that thing.
Yeah, 100%.
I was also very pro, and I still am, in any sort of performative D&D that I watch, I really want to see character death. I think watching character death and watching players figure out how to navigate character death and then bringing on new characters is one of the most entertaining things. And it was one of the things that I ended up, I think, getting annoyed with in season 2 of Critical Role. Spoiler alert for season 2 of Critical Role, but like I liked that one of the characters died pretty early, and I was a little bit annoyed that it felt like it was not. I felt like it was almost obvious that it wasn't going to happen again after a little while. Like you could sort like there was I don't know. I want more character death. I love it.
I just love fetish of killing characters. Do you?
I don't like killing characters. I like watching shows where there's characters. I don't want to have to. I don't want to have to do that emotional labor.
Yeah. Do you have to? Do you give your players like plot armor and stuff when you're playing as a dungeon master, or do you? Go
I try
after
not
them,
to. I try not to. I've always rolled out in the open. It's just the way that I learned to play.
Okay.
So I don't have the ability to use plot armor in the same way because the players are seeing what I'm rolling.
You can definitely plot armor without just fudging rolls though, like choosing to go for a different character with the monster.
Just picking what abilities you're using. They don't know. They don't know what spells it has. They don't know how much. If I could decide this attack does 3d10 damage instead of 5d10 damage, you know what I mean? Like you can just change
exactly.
it.
Now that you've done this amount of damage, you've triggered the feature where it's starting to lose its armor. You've damaged its armor now. You've damaged its scales, and you're tearing its scales off, and so its armor class has gone down.
The only time that I do plot armor now is because of a situation that I had a while ago where I had a combat encounter where I killed 2 characters at the same time in the same. They were level 5 or 6, and they were dealing with. So they had basically found a cult worshiping some mind flayer relic. And they were starting to try to turn into mind flayers or something. But basically they had an encounter with 2 mind flayers, and they were level 6 or 5 or 6. And there were a lot of players. There were 7 players, but still mind flayers are scary. And the mind flayers did the psionic blast thing. They both got it off on the same turn. And that just dropped 2 of the players to 0.
Yeah.
And then they just went up to the players at 0 and ate their brains. And what happened afterwards was whenever I have a character death, I try to make it a moment. Like I try to give the character a big last hurrah. If the character is either very religious or magical, I usually have like a cutaway to them like entering into their afterlife or returning to the magic that they come from or whatever. And then I also try to create a situation very quickly afterwards where all of the other characters have the opportunity to like sit around a fire or around a bar or whatever and tell stories about that character. It's very cathartic. And when a player loses a character, it's a very lonely sadness. And I think the job of a dungeon master when a player loses the character is to make that player A, excited for their next character, but B, make them not feel alone in that grief. And I think the best way to make them not feel alone in the grief is to have the other players grieve with them.
Yeah.
And when 2 characters die, you have to do all of that twice, and it's fucking awkward. So if I have ever in a situation where a character is probably going to die, I make sure I sort of bend things to be like, all right, I either go, and I do this in my head. I'm like, all right, either this character is going to die this fight or they're all going to die.
Yeah.
Like that, there's no in between, because I don't want to deal with having to do 3 emotional fucking little mini arcs to like be a good dungeon master. That's too much work and it's awkward. One character death or all character death.
I mean, it must be like a bell curve, right? Though, like, because if you get all but one dying, then you've still only got to do it once. Because it's just that is how that guy feels about being the last one left alive.
That's true.
I've always wondered about
that. Did happen to me once. Oh
yeah,
I had that happened one time. Yeah.
I have always wondered about PPKs, the partial party kills, where like one person is left alive, and like, what do you do at that point? Do you roll a new party? Does this guy like? Do we roll?
I'll tell you what I did.
Session?
This was one of my favorite. This group of people, we don't play that much together anymore because everybody's busy, and like one of them is a musician that's traveling all the time. One of them is in the fashion world. Basically, people that do weird stuff for a living where they're traveling a lot. But
yeah,
they had a thing where there's 4 of them. 3 of their characters died. I created a puzzle room. I'm very proud of the puzzle room. I think it's a cool puzzle room. But they just didn't figure it out, and they spiraled. They death spiraled, and there was no stopping them. But one player got out, and his character was like, the way that he played his character was sort of like an ex. He was like a survivor of a pretty intense war, and was like a little bit of like a grizzled but well-intentioned vet.
Right.
And then the next campaign we played, we time jumped a year and a half, and he stayed that character. And basically, when we re-entered the campaign, everyone else had new characters, but it started with his character, like rock bottom in a bar, like you sort of like he had spent a year like being super fucked up and like leaning into sort of the tropes of like it was like reliving all that trauma and stuff. So the next campaign started in like a resort town, but off season, which is like the most depressing place to be if you've ever been to a place like that. With like him in like a shitty tiki bar in the afternoon, like meeting other players. But that's how we made it work. Is like he stayed the same character, and we got to like sort of see what his character how his character had been affected in that like year or so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you put everybody back in at the same level as him, or did you de-level him?
Yeah, no, fuck that. That's boring. It's a waste of time. I actually did de-level him. No, I didn't. We just kept the same. Because they weren't that far. They were level 5 or level 6, and it's like I'm happy to start at level 5 or level 6. That's not crazy.
That's fine. I do like occasionally the story type of somebody who's like, I was once higher level than this, essentially, like somebody who has gone down. We start the campaign at level 3 or whatever, and they have downward spiraled, so they've got this backstory that is only really appropriate if they were level 7 or something. But at the end of that backstory, they got an injury and they've been out of it for 2 years, or they lost their family, and so they went on a downward bender, and now they're like level 3 and just kind of like working their way back up again. They've lost a lot of, because it's not just the levels of what they can do, it's like their training. Are they rusty in what they can do? Can they attack twice in a turn? No, because they're slow and they need to.
They haven't swung the sword in a couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. And so like having to work their way back up again, or I kind of like that sometimes. All right,
I like that a lot if you have a nuanced players, but as soon as you have the player that's like, I'm a dragon god stuck in a human body, I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about knowing whether the player's a role player or whether they're just like a min maxer and they want to just have reason to have killed a Tiamat in their past. All right, last couple of questions, then we'll try and get through them quick because we're almost out of time. Joe Baby asks, what is your favorite thing to homebrew? Monsters, items, weapons, classes, etc. For me, probably monsters. I've done items, I've done spells, I've done all sorts of homebrew, but I enjoy coming up with new, weird, cool abilities. Like one time I came up with a two-headed wolf creature that was kind of elemental in respect, and it came from a purpose, like you were saying, like, what is the purpose of this thing being here? It was to try and work on this problem I was having of a static fight. Like, the first round of a combat is everybody runs into the position they want to be in, and then the 2nd through 10th round of combat is we're in this position hitting each other. And so to try and like find ways to tackle that, I came up with this homebrewed monster that was basically every turn that he doesn't use any movement, he roots himself down into the ground even further, and he gets like a hardened shell of rock, and his AC goes up by 2. And then if he is forced to move on his round. And that's the reason I made him a beast, because I didn't want him to have any chance of ranged weapons or thrown weapons or whatever. He's just a dog, so he has to get into melee if he wants to attack. So if you move away from him and force him to attack, then he is forced to move. and if he moves, he breaks this shell open and his AC goes back down to normal. So I was trying to force them to be like, and also not only that, they could just be like, well, I've got a high enough attack modifier, I'll just keep going. It doesn't matter that his AC is now 19, now it's a 21, now it's a 23. I can still hit him. If he ever gets to an AC of 25, he entirely gets the petrified condition. He turns into stone, becomes resistant to all damage, and then the next round, the stone shatters open and he's healed all his damage. So
that's really fun.
And so it was like a real like you've got to keep moving, and they're like attacks of opportunity. Oh god, we're gonna get attacks of opportunity from this thing, but at least then we can keep him from healing. And so they kept having to move away. He would take an attack of opportunity. I also gave him 2 reactions because he had 2 heads, so he could attack 2 of them as they moved away. So they quickly were forced into this situation of going, okay, I've got the highest AC, so I will move into his range, and then I will move out again immediately on my turn, just to try and take away one of those reactions, so that the squishy wizard can then move away, or whatever it was. So like coming up with monsters, I like thinking about that sort of thing, and like I was talking about with my hags before and stuff as well. Like I think homebrewing monsters is my jam. How about you?
I like low CR monsters. I like monsters CR 5 and lower. I like CR 10 and lower, but I have a lot of fun coming up with low CR monsters, and I really like making subclasses. I don't do it super often, but trying to solve the puzzle of how do I make this feel like it exists in D&D and a player has access to it is very satisfying when you can like find the mechanics that sync together. Yeah. So subclasses. I love making subclasses.
And the last question from Derek Silverstone. What is your favorite rarity of magic item to brew or use? I think legendary and artifact are just too much. There's too much going on, and there's like, you know, as you said with the monsters and stuff, you're not going to use half the features because you're going to forget them, or you're going to just like find the 1 or 2 things that this item does that you're actually interested in, and just do that. I think I just in general like low level play quite a lot. Like not 1 to 3 level, but like 5 to 10 is kind of my wheelhouse of D&D. Like the monsters are interesting. You've got enough hit points to like make a fight interesting, but still dangerous. You've got quite a lot of features you can do, but not like so many that you're overwhelmed. And items, kind of the same. I like homebrewing common items, just like funny things that only have one single very niche purpose, or like rare items that have a few different things you can do with them, or are relatively powerful. So somewhere in that wheelhouse, I think. Yeah,
I'm similar. Common items are fun if they're goofy. I really like one-time use overpowered items.
Yes.
Yeah. It's just a little too strong, but it's just one and done. And I also really like, I think rare and very rare are my favorites because that's the place where you can sit, where you have a lot of wiggle room to make it have like ribbon features, and make it like it can do a thing that's like a thing that's always on and a thing that's like once a day. Like that's a solid item for me, you know? So probably rare. Rare,
I like making I like making consumable things and giving them enough consumable things that they don't have that video game problem of going, well, this is too powerful to use. I'm gonna use this later, or I've only got one of them. Like give them a few things and like give them enough of them that they go, oh, we can use these. He's gonna give us more. So like way earlier than you'd expect to be giving them legendary items, I give one of my parties a sovereign glue. A glue that can stick anything to anything
is one of
forever.
The best
it's
items
amazing
to give people
because
early.
you just give them and you go, what are you going to do with it? You've got a one-use thing. It's going to be consumed, but like, and you don't have the universal solvent to get it off again. So what are you going to do with it? And the way that they did it was actually going back to that same giant fight that I was talking about with the hill, the what are they called? The stalwart bulwark ones. The dreadnoughts. That's what they're called. He has a trampling charge that if he hits you with his shield, it does something ridiculous amount of piercing damage, plus something ridiculous amount of bludgeoning, plus something ridiculous amount of fire, and he crit a guy on it. So he did and I use brutal crits where I max out the amount you could have rolled and then roll again on top of that. And so he took the paladin down from like 100 hit points to like 0 in a single shot. Not enough to outright kill him, but still, like, he did over 100 hit points worth of damage with this crit. Basically smeared the paladin across the stage, and they were like, oh fuck, what are we gonna do? And so one of them was like, distract him a second, and he got the sovereign glue and he made a big line of it across the ground. And I looked at the thing and it says it takes a minute to set, and I was like, no, fuck that. They're using it in they're finally using this glue I gave them several sessions ago, and it's for an amazing thing. Puts a line down while the giant's distracted, looking the other way, and then he stands out in the open and he goes, "Yeah, you did that to him, but do it to me, I dare you." And the guy did put the shields down, slammed them down onto the floor like I described before, and he drags them across the floor, and he's coming towards you like a steam train. Scraping this thing across, and then it hits the line of glue, and bam! Suddenly his shields are stuck. And oh god, amazing. And not only that, but he's got them strapped to his arms, so now he's stuck as well. He's restrained to his own shield. They run around the back. I suddenly reduced because in D&D 5e you don't really have a directional AC anymore. It's not like you get bonuses for being behind them, but now you do. Bam! I give him kind of like they do with the Ankheg, where like it's got a different AC from beneath than it does from above. I think it's one of the only monsters that has directional AC for some reason. But suddenly this fire giant with like 25 AC, because the two huge tower shields, has got like an 18 AC from behind. So suddenly they run around and they start stabbing him in the shins, and they start stabbing him in the calves, and they start stabbing him in the kidneys. And he's meanwhile taking his actions to drop one of the shields, drop the other shield, and then they just manage to kill him. So that's I love being like, here's a powerful item, use it as you will. Even like wands, I'll take a wand that has a recharge ability, and I'll just remove the recharge ability and be like, here's a wand of fireballs at first level.
That's what I was gonna say.
You got a wand of fireballs at first level. What are you going to do with it? Yeah.
My favorite magic item to give players early, because I like giving it to new players, is the Wand of Wonder. It's a D100. It has like a bunch of charges. They don't run out, or they do run out, and it does crazy overpowered things for a level 1 party, but it's a crazy random roll. So it's like players just want, it's like a toy. It's just like they just blasted at stuff. Yeah. overpowered things that another item that I give players pretty regularly is a potion where it's like the next spell you cast just does max damage.
Right, yeah.
It's a great one. People are super hesitant to use it, but it's
use
always epic feeling when they do.
I've got an item in the Dragonlance game that I'm playing in that's like a golden scratch card, essentially, and if I scratch it, I get an automatic hit on my next attack roll. Not a crit, but just like I can automatically hit. And I'm just holding onto it, being like, I'm going to need that at some point. I'm going to need that.
There's going to be a god or something.
There's going to be something with an AC that nobody else can hit, and I'm going to be like, well, here we go then.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time. We're over time, and this has been a hell of a lot of fun. I could clearly talk to you for another several hours at least. But we will when we kick each other's ass on D20 Deathmatch soon.
Yes. Before we go, in front of how many people are here? In front of the 99 or so people that are watching, can we do something else? Can this not be the last time we do like a thing together? Can I get that commitment from you?
Oh yeah,
in front of your audience.
Definitely, I will commit myself to doing something else. Because I
agree, this is a breeze. This is super fun.
I would tell you what I would like to do, being that we are both quite into homebrew in a big way, and we think similarly. I think I would like to homebrew something with you at some point, like come on your stream and we do some homebrew or something. I don't know.
Or we could stream at the same time and collab.
Both stream, collab, whatever it's going to be. We're going to do something. It's going to be a lot of fun. You heard it here first, everybody. So, before we head off on this raid, then. Firstly, actually, here my editor's gonna love me for remembering this. Can you give me a summarized, pithy homebrew advice that can fit into a single YouTube short? Because I'm trying to take snippets of things from conversations, and quite often she goes, you know, you talked really well about a lot of things, but they were all rambling conversations, and I can't snip any of it.
Sure.
For the TikTok.
There are three things you need to think about when you're writing homebrew. Is it balanced compared to everything else that's at the table? Is it easy enough to understand that it's not going to slow the game down when you're using it at the table? And is it evocative in a way that inspires stories and ideas in the people that are using it?
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. Is it evocative? That's a big one. Is it fun to play?
Is it evocative is the most important. But balance and clarity are also important. But if it's not evocative, then the other two don't matter.
Thank you very much. Where can people find you, Cinder?
I am on the YouTube. I'm Cinderblock Sally on YouTube. I'm also Cinderblock Sally on Instagram. I'm also Cinderblock something on Twitter. I stream on YouTube usually 3 or 4 days a week. I stream homebrew reviews, like I said, where people submit homebrew to my forums that are on my Discord or whatever. And then I review your homebrew, or we write homebrew together. We also do call-in shows. And I mostly talk about D&D or just like goof off. Sometimes we have little dance parties, and that's about it. Check me out on YouTube.
Nice.
Be my buddy.
And if you are here from Cinderblock Sally's community and you don't know who I am, I'm Robert Hartley, GM, full-time game master, D&D creator, all over the internet, Robert Hartley GM. I do interactive D&D on my channel here on Twitch. I also do reviews of my own games with the Viva La Dirt League guys on Mondays. I do a lot of these short rest series where I chat with interesting, fun people from the community, so you can check those out. They're available in podcast form as well if you want to listen to them. Find me all over the internet, Robert Hartley GM, or at Viva La Dirt League D&D. I think, I don't hear any oozes outside anymore, so I think it's about time that we set off into these sewers. And
the bottle's almost empty anyway.
Yeah, we're all out of this celestial wine. I am tripping balls. There's something in celestial wine that is definitely hallucinogenic, I can tell. So let's head off through the sewers and try not to get mobbed by oozes. Thank you very much for being here, everybody. Stick around for the raid. Bye-bye.
Hey, you've reached the end. This is the part where I've got to say something funny and or witty. And so like it and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.